going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We will begin today with a ceremonial event by swearing in our new duly appointed commissioner, Ms. Kpk Consulting.
Please repeat after me. I, Kpk Sorrells, having accepted an appointment to serve as commissioner of the Housing Authority, City of Brunswick, do swear or affirm that I shall abide by the laws, rules, and regulations which govern the operation of housing authorities in the state of Georgia, and that I shall endeavor during my tenure to serve the low-income citizens of my community by providing safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. Thank you very much. Welcome. We have a handbook given to all the commissioners. The packet. Look over that. Your convenience. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorrells, for joining us here at the Brunswick Public Housing Authority. We look forward to great ideas. All right, I will entertain a motion for the agenda.
I entertain a motion that we accept the agenda for July 13th, 2022.
Second. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. We will begin with a moment of silence followed by a prayer from Commissioner Anderson.
Our Father God, we thank you for this opportunity once again to handle the business of Brunswick Housing Authority. Lord, I pray that you bless this meeting, that we will accomplish what we've come to do. We will work together in unity, love, and good to protect our city, our residents, staff, and this great community of Brunswick, Georgia. We thank you now for blessing us now. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Let's have our report, our monthly reports on Officer Wright.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'll be reading the monthly report for the month of June. Abby Andrews had 17 calls, 2 reports, which was theft in her auto and 1 harassment. Brooklyn Annex didn't have any calls nor reports. Brooklyn Homes North, 29 calls, 3 reports, suspicious drugs, and a warrant process, which led to 2 arrests. Brooklyn Homes South, 2 calls, no reports. Mercer Alabama, 7 calls, 1 theft in her auto. McIntyre Court, 65 calls, 6 reports, 3 juvenile problems, civil matter, problem with person, and 1 runaway juvenile. Glenvilla, 43 calls, 6 reports, forgery, juvenile problem, a warrant process led to arrest, theft, and 2 child abuse calls. Hopkins Homes Annex, 3 calls, 1 terroristic threats. Hopkins Homes, 20 calls, 7 reports, which was 2 suspicious, 2 domestics, 1 fight, 1 trespassing, and 1 juvenile problem.
Within the theft entering autos, are there any weapons over?
No weapons that was stolen out of the vehicles.
Any other questions for Officer Wright? Thank you, Officer Wright.
Thank you.
We've already sworn in Commissioner Sorrell. We move on to Zoom presentation from Mr. Campbell.
And Mr. Campbell? Yes. Keegan Campbell.
Is he prepared?
Kick this out, I believe. We have to get in touch with them to get us out.
Apologize. We gave them a later date, a later time. They give us to come in. This company will assist us to get to the federal level, to get help us get appropriations, legislation that we pretty much earmarked for like grants for housing authority. We're talking more in detail how we will strategize to get there. And it's going to be a very creative, but productive way of creating revenues and grant opportunities for not only the housing authority but for this community. The housing authority historically, not only this housing authority but across this country, have been pretty much isolated as a disadvantaged community. However, the new generation, a new way of thinking is now housing authorities are actually part of the counterpart of the holistic community. And because of that, there are a lot of initiatives out there that the historical approach to housing administration, housing initiative has pretty much changed. So we're on the ground floor now. And we're very fortunate to be in a position to take advantage of some of these opportunities. We are projecting to be in DC in October, so we got to do some fast. We got to do a lot of our strategic planning 5-year plan, what we want to be, what our initiatives are. And our initiatives are going to be very unique in our approach to solving some of our issues and some of our problems. We're going to have to reorganize this community, and this is the presentation that you see today. Is kind of the first step, first phase of it. And it's the most expedient way to get it done. It's going to allow us to do things that we've never done before. Also, when we get into the organizations, the new organization, we are creating opportunities for our employees, which was shows them a path for success. So I think that you're going to like that presentation. I saw it, and so it's where we can. Then also they're going to chronicle our story. So if we chronicle this correctly, we should be able to get an outcome. I'm asking for a Netflix contract. Because it will tell our story. These are the type of stories that we tell. So we should be,
So this organization is going to assist us with grants and obtaining them, or
they're going to assist us with grants and obtaining them, put us in the right position to create. So the decision making can hear our story and our needs, and historically, my experience when you're in that position, you got to identify and know your ask, and they will help us to generate our ask. And so if you know your ask, they'll know how to where to send us and where that pocket is put your money. So for time's sake, I would request that the board would move down the agenda to the visual presentation, and then
which presentation are you speaking of? I believe we're at Mr. Kimball now. That's what
yeah,
we're
we have
discussing,
Mr.
right?
Campbell here.
We've got. I guess we're waiting a few minutes before they can.
Yeah. So is Mr. Earl what's over here? Mr. Brooks law firm here?
Yes.
I think we move to that. I make a recommendation to the board.
What's your point?
We can move along until this is ready to, so.
So let's have the Brooks Brothers presentation, and then when Mr. Kimball returns and/or Mr. McCullum.
McCullum, yes.
I guess is Mr. Collins going to be here in person?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move the Brooks Brothers presentation and get into Zoom, our regular course hereafter.
Not a problem. Commissioner, do you want me to, Chairman, do you want me to make the presentation from here, or is it kind of formal area you do it? I'm not familiar with the process.
You know what, if you can just move in this general area so we can.
Right over there? Okay, that's
so
fine.
we can, get you filmed properly.
Okay, that'll be one.
Which phone? I thought you said this is running.
Like, anywhere in there is fine.
I'm not gonna take the shine.
Anywhere in there is fine.
Exactly. Okay, so my name is Charles Brooks, representing one half of the Brooks Brothers, both lawyers. Myself, I'm from the University of Virginia. We worked together as a municipal government for over 20 years, representing Jefferson County, which is one of the largest counties in the state of Alabama at the time. It was the largest, I think it's the number 2, Virginia, close to number 2 right now. We also represented Birmingham, both in their personnel issues, the litigation issues, and issues dealing with policies and procedures. We also work with personnel issues in terms of their employee problems. I won't say problems. You bring about solutions based upon what you have to face. What we faced at that time was the issue of which jobs, which descriptions, how you grade the post, those kind of issues. We were part of that reorganization and part of the process that took place at school. Kind of fast forwarding what that means for Brunswick and Brunswick Housing Authority. We're here to make sure that the organization has consistency in terms of its application, consistency in terms of what you want to put together in terms of its organization. So the first consistency I'm talking about is just the employment standpoint. We are published 11th Circuit Court of Appeals lawyers. For those of you not familiar, on the federal side, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama are all covered by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. We're published lawyers at the appellate court level, and we were the ones who initiated Jackson versus Birmingham Board of Education Title IX case that went to the United States Supreme Court. And those were our peers that were part of that particular case. So on the litigation side of employment, we take that to apply it to a policy standpoint, so you don't end up in litigation. Because we became quite proficient suing cities and authorities and entities that didn't follow the rules. So that was kind of what we would know. Yeah. But y'all want me to take a break? Continue. Okay. So that's part of it. Part of it is the structuring of what the name of their, or how you describe the particular function. What does that mean integrated to other things? What does that mean in terms of what you're trying to achieve? Policies and procedures. You have to be compliant, and I can go through all the FHA in terms of compliance, but I'll go to one little subtext. I handled one of the first ADA compliance cases in the country, out of Birmingham, the Lambert case, Lambert versus Quality Machines, which is the sub-issue about access. That is huge in terms of any housing authority. Not trying to get into legal minutia in terms of those issues, but it's about making sure that we make sure that the housing meets federal government regulations and guidelines. And there's many of them that once we do an audit of what it is and isn't, then we correct. Once we do an audit on the employment issues, once you do an audit on job descriptions, because it's not just about what the person does, it's about how that description interplays with other entities within it. In other words, if somebody is a director, what does assistant director mean in terms of responsibilities and what you have to do and what you're trying to achieve? So those are all things that we'll do in terms of policy. Also, in terms of integrating with the team, I actually know the gentleman who are going to present shortly. I worked in DC as well. I'm also the National General Counsel for SCLC, Martin Luther King's organization, and I was their international rep. So I've actually handled a government organization for the Amazigh tribe in South Africa, and with the Tanzanian government and IMF in Tanzania. So I've worked on very small, very big, very diverse, different culture patterns. You integrate all of that into what you're trying to do to meet the regulations for the particular area. And also, lastly, that also integrates to asking for assistance. The assistance ask, in this particular case, and those gentlemen are very elite in what they do, the assistance ask is about making sure that how you're presented integrates in terms of what the person who has the money wants to give you. So let me kind of reverse engineer what we're talking about. There's the notion of this is what we need, so this is what we're going to ask for. And I think I'm a little bit, Brooks Firm is very available to help you. This is what is available. This is what you should try to fit into. So it changes kind of the way you look at it. And those gentlemen are going to help you with your needs. And my job is going to be more so about helping you with your availability. If that makes sense. Like there might be a wish list that you don't even know you want. But if we can get it and it's helpful, we should go get it. So that's kind of how that is. And we've had over a 20-year history in it. The firm was founded in 1992, so we're talking about a 30-year history in that sense. Licensed in federal licenses, not a bunch of state licenses. Federally licensed in Mississippi, Alabama, practiced in Georgia, Maryland, Texas, Florida. That's all I can remember off the top of my head. Any questions? I wanted to entertain any.
So, Mr. Brooks, we can briefly take it out. we have a lot of policies and procedures we need to come into compliance from employees to maintenance to contracts. What we're looking for from you all is to help us design those policies in-house so we can go to our legal and we're not having to stress our legal out with a with policy in the first grade. Second grade person should have create. So that's really that's my first concern. And my second concern is are you all capable of giving us an EOC audit?
Yes.
Creating those remedies that we're going to need.
Yes.
There's a lot of disparities.
Yeah, our largest private audit was for Budweiser. We firm that about 15 years ago. Our largest audit of an entity was the city of Birmingham.
Okay.
So, much bigger organization. And to answer your question very specifically through an example, I'll give you an example of internal policy that applies to legal that people didn't truly understand. Let's say you have to have a ramp, right?
Yeah.
So I dealt with a ramp case one time. The issue wasn't that the authority didn't have a ramp. They had a ramp. But the ramp had brakes in it such that it would tip a wheelchair over. So the issue wasn't necessarily that people understood they had a ramp. They didn't understand how it should be in compliance in a way to make sure it yielded accessibility. So instead of saying, I need a ramp, which of course your legal is going to approve a ramp, you come up with a policy that says the ramp has to be at this angle, the ramp has to be at this type of issues, these are the issues of accessibility, and you attach the case law to it, federal case law, to make it easier so that it goes to legal. You're not hassling legal as hard, working legal's ability to go where you see one ramp. So as a lawyer, I can also say, we're going to answer the questions that you ask. My job is more so to come up with the answers that you didn't ask to begin with, which might be relevant to whether or not you have liability, if that makes sense.
And that's what we're concerned with. I know y'all are attorneys,
Right.
but we need you on the policy and procedure side to
Exactly.
coordinate with our legal counsel. We have a lot of housing issues, structure-wise, and how we're executing. We got to create an envelope of protection for this agency, and I'm looking for what we're going to policy and procedure side to help us protect the agency, protect the board, protect the staff, and also making sure that we're in compliance. And again, with returning to our legal counsel to make sure that have to create that envelope of protection. If we going to look for someone that understands that we need to rewrite our legal out and our ACOG so that there's some procedures in there that we got to bring current. We're requesting that information. George, Ms. Cooper, anything that I'm missing something on top of my head? ACOG and admin. Yes. And so we really, this agency has operated historically under different procedures and different processes. Those processes are no longer, granddad is a post type. And so, which we want to bring it into the next century, we want to make us more, we want our community to be more integrated into Wayne County as a whole, from a procedural, from a process. We need to make sure that happens, and we need to protect our residents. So we need resident association that needs to get up and going, which I'm looking for that to happen. Helping with that, with developing policies. We're also looking for how to structure their procedures and policies. So we need someone that's going to hit the ground running. I've been tasked for a short period to get this ready. So I need contractors and consultants that's going to put us in a position to not only parliamentary procedures, but do y'all have the capability of creating other revenue streams for us, identifying other revenue streams?
I need two real quick, one of which you're very familiar with, because they're about to work on in Northern North Carolina. First thing, to address your first set of questions about regulations, I'll give a very specific example. In terms of what would have been previously ad hoc, something that people just kind of did a certain way. Accessibility to the home. You gotta have a policy in terms of how that accessibility works, so you can protect the person who has to go in from being accused of doing something they didn't do. You also want to protect the resident from the fact that this is the policy and procedure when you're inside, to make sure that that you protect the resident, because we know what kind of conduct they should engage in when they're there and what goes on a personal line in terms of what those interactions are. So that's just a minor example of what you're talking about there. Going further to what I think you're talking about, which is actually will bring a lot of money in and actually increase your tax base. One of the issues about poverty is the more poor people you have to put resources into those who lack resources in order to make sure that they have a living. Labor force development, of which you're very familiar and you work for, are trying to transition people out in terms of a workforce development. And I've worked directly with Physic about it. And they were highly successful with a project in North Carolina, which transformed the economic development of the area. So that's just labor force development. That has nothing to do with some of the other things that deal with housing, some other things that deal with examples. Once your policies and procedures in place, what's available in DC, just there's a lot. And, I can come up and answer questions for hours, but yes, that's what we're capable of doing. And we just begin to go hit. And it feels like there's multiple areas we're gonna have to hit at once. And as you use the statement, hit the ground running, which is exactly what we do.
And so, and I hear my question. Part of our assessment is our the initiatives. One of our problems that I have identified, one of the problems that one of the issues that we have from an administrative standpoint is that we got a lot of initiatives, but the results are not there. So we need to get the results that we need expand some of the initiatives or mature those initiatives, but we need results from them and bring the necessary opportunities for our residents, for our mobility. And so that's what I'm looking for, a Fairfax experience. So if we can make this housing authority, raising our housing authority, taxpayers, expand our taxpayers, then we have more, we have a stronger voice at the table. And so we're gonna need the mining program, we're gonna need the air power program, we're gonna need those type of programs that I got plenty of men out there that will more than willing to go on the polls, but they're afraid of the police officers. I lost a couple of them yesterday. So we got to change the dynamic. And the last charge is that we're going to bring on and create our own security / with arrest power. I need for you to help write those policies and work with our security division be able to, from a precision policy, across every department. Are you all willing to take it?
We are, and we work both sides of the fence there. And just, in terms of full disclosure, if you look at our history in the early 2000s, we were more so suing police officers as opposed to working for them, but that transition is taking place.
Yeah.
So all you got to do is take the experience of what you see and what they're going through, and then you apply it in a way to make sure you have a safe environment for police officers, because you begin to identify patterns. One of the most dangerous things for police officers, and I don't care about the economic circumstances, is domestic. You get a domestic call, a police officer know that's one of the most dangerous calls going. Ways to address that through the housing authority to make that safer for the police officers. And there's been some things, and there's some new technologies that you may or may not be interested in, we can talk about later, that can make it identifiable and safer for police officers. And there's other things you can do to identify those things. Sometimes, even through the kids in the school systems, in terms of identifying the problems. before it gets to the point that an officer's life is in danger. Because that's a part of it. Part of policing in terms of a housing authority improving it is not relaxing housing. I think that's a misnomer. The question is how to make it effective and safe for all parties. And of course, the police officers are our partners in everything that we want to do. We want to make it as safe for them as possible. If we put in the right policies, we'll actually make their jobs easier. That should be a goal in connection with or congruent with giving an opportunity to make residents feel safe. So it's not an either or, it's not a trade-off that some people think in their minds. Making residents safe means oppression. Letting residents have freedom means putting cops in danger or reducing their ability to engage to protect themselves. It doesn't work like that, but some people make that attention. It really shouldn't exist, and proper policies will address those things.
Also, I wanted.
Hang on, we have a question from Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure I understand, in terms of the legal policy review, is there some intersection of that review with tenant rights and the ability to put policies in place that honor those, tenants and their rights as renters?
Exactly, and that's what you want to do. You want to protect the rights of the renters because sowing the seeds of resentment under the thought process that this will make it a better housing authority because you have oppressive policies doesn't benefit anybody because the backlash is going to come. And also, asserting tenants' rights doesn't mean the tenant just do whatever they want to do. Once the tenants know what the real right is, get that information out. Because now what you begin to have is a lot of people who are, for lack of a better word, they got jailhouse law on the side, which says I can do this and this and this, and the cops can't do anything. None of that's true. Now you've created a conflict between the police officer and the resident that's untenable. And guess what? The side of law and order is what everybody in this community wants, no matter the economic status. But if they understood, to the best of our abilities, to disseminate the information, what's going on and why this is the right, but this is where it ends, this is where enforcement begins, you'll get a better result. So I think that addresses your question.
Historically, I understand that the staff have not been allowed to present this to the board. I want to say on record that this administration is giving staff full right to present where it's appropriate, where it's appropriate, and have rights to ask questions. Ms. Cooper, Housing Director, and Ms. Dyer, Financial Director, and Mr. Mike, Inspector Director, and our assistant is not here, Dr. Nixon. So I want everyone to feel free, the board, to interact with the staff as you see fit. Are there any questions from the staff? I do have an IT thing. I do have to do some things for IT. I'm not sure what that looks like right now. Mr. Bradley, Mr. Hakeem on that. With some new information on this. So I have no more questions.
Board, do you have any other questions for Mr. Brooks?
When do we stop?
Okay. Question.
Sure.
And I'm not an attorney. They play one on TV once, but it was a local program. And I guess this would be a general question for the two attorneys here, because again, these are within this realm of what you are presenting to us today. And the two of you have your individual answers. Is this going to duplicate any legal efforts? I mean, we have legal counsel, and I understand that. And I don't want to infringe upon or anything with my legal counsel that we have. But I need to know from legal and Mr. Brooks, Mr. Hartman and Mr. Brooks. I don't fully understand how this comes together, and I need to understand that so I'm not stepping on anyone's toes. So you guys kind of walk me through that, at least for what you guys' understanding of this is.
I can tell you about my previous experience, because when I was working in the city of Birmingham, they had in-house counsel. We were outside all the time doing evaluations. When you sanction the policies and procedures that you're doing, you make it easier on the lawyer by including the site because you can say whatever policy you like. Lawyers want to know why are you saying that, and what gives you the authority to say you can or can't, or whatever it is that you're saying. So you don't, from my standpoint, you don't create a duplication if you're given where it's coming from, that you're just not making yourself off the top of your head. But that's my short answer to that question.
Yeah, so this is the first I've heard of it, so I don't have an answer for you. I mean, I'm sure we can work together and figure out, I mean,
And just so
I
I'm
just,
clear,
I don't know enough to have an answer.
Well, let me say.
let me, no, just so I'm clear. You're not coming on as our attorneys. You're coming on just as a policy procedures advisor.
Policy procedures advisor, but because I'm attorneys, I'm gonna give you where it's coming from, so that my policies don't create secondary work when you're more than that's unnecessary. In other words, you're gonna, if I say, you can't have a grade on a ramp more than 90 degrees, da 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 da, it's gonna be because of case, da 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 da. So that we know we're grounded in something that's really grounded, preferably in this area, like this area from our federal district court, or the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, or maybe another circuit or the Supreme Court. As long as, excuse me, I've done a lot of smoke last night. So the issue is giving the policies and procedures, but not giving it without any context. So if you give it with context, it'll speed up the process. From my personal previous interactions with the city of Birmingham, with I dealt with Jackson, Mississippi, that's just the way we did it. But you know, I'm just going on past performance.
Okay. So I think I'm clear. You're coming on as an advisor that happens to be an attorney, but our attorneys, you're not going to be stepping on their toes. You'll be our, again, advisors on our policy moving forward and help to support our existing attorneys.
Well, I don't think man's is shrinking violence, so he'll tell me if I'm stepping on the stone.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mitchell.
They're gonna be more than advisors. They're gonna help us to write our policies and procedures and to help us, bring us in line into compliance. This is just the administrative arm of it. And so you got the legal counsel, you got the administrative arm. And, the professionals that I have researched about Mr. Hartman and what I know about Brooks, I don't think that we would have any issues on that. And then we do, they'll work it out, but they're here to write policies and procedures and to bring us in compliance to make sure that we're protecting, first of all, this agency, the board, and the staff, and as well as our residents. So we're working all hand in hand. So when Mr. Attorney Hartman have to represent us, he knows, okay, this is already done. We're in compliance. Things I can't say right now. I'm on probation. Let's just say we need to come in compliance with our operating procedures, with our personnel policies, and other procedures. And so we need to bring in that envelope of protection from inside, from an administrative standpoint, so we get where we need to go. And they're also going to be doing some contractual reviews for us and to recommend some ways how to hold people close to the fire, so to speak, and coordinate that with our council and what we really need to do to protect this age. We have a lot of money going, resources and revenues going out, and I don't see the results. So they're going to look at all that. So now, it's a little bit. It's a little bit more complex than advising because we are out. We got to come to compliance. We got to come up to the 22nd, 2022. Let me put it that way.
So again, it's just a presentation by Mr.
No, I'm requesting the board to be appointed, to be commissioned in the contract with them today. I think you have a copy of that contract.
I have two questions. scope of work that you laid out? What capacity does it take of your staff to support that work? And then what's the timeline?
I would say it's gonna be at least 2 lawyers and 1 legal assistant. It's, might move over into another legal assistant and a junior lawyer. We'll definitely have 2 senior lawyers to do it, based upon what I'm hearing. Because you're asking me a very specific question without having examined it.
Well, I was really, in terms of staff support, I was thinking the housing authority administratively, what support is needed from your end to support this process? And then what's the general timeline to complete?
You asking me?
Yes, sir.
We're understaffed. We don't have the capacity to do what he needs to do, what we got to get done. That's the reason I'm reaching out to contractors to bring us in compliance so we can improve our scores, we can be better stewards of the responsibilities that we have. If we had capacity, there would be no need to do. We need someone to come in and help us write out policies and procedures. If it was just one area, I wouldn't have that meeting. I go to Mr. Hartman, say, listen, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We are
And I guess based on not having any capacity, I just want to understand.
No, we have
capacity.
some. We have some, but this staff is so taxed. We got one person right now doing payroll, housing director, maintenance, and she had personnel, so I'm trying to pull all that out first so she can be the housing director. You know, and this staff is so undertrained that it's almost, if they can do this, I would need to bring in a transition team to help me do what I've been charged by this board to do. And so when we finish, we want to hand this agent back over to this board. And it's a run. I want to get us back to high performance. The best way to do that I know how to do is bring in outside people and companies that are all they do is what we ask them to do.
And based on that ability, what would be the timeline?
We're looking at six right now. They gave me 6 months. I'm looking at 6 months, and they as a courtesy favor to me. They have gave me a real, so I'm very thankful that rate they gave us.
Question. When you said that the staff wasn't, that they weren't trained, is that part of, is that because of a lack of training, or is it just simply, or can you explain that? Can you elaborate on that?
For the record, it said under-trained, right?
Undertrained, I'm sorry, you said undertrained.
Well, let me address it this way. Public housing evolved in how they fund projects, evolved how executive director lead, involved how staff administrative policies and procedures. This agency this department, they didn't evolve. And it worked well for this community. It worked well for the community. But when I've been challenged with, what the board has communicated to me, where you want to go, you're gonna have to train the staff up, and we got to get more. We got to get staff trained, get them certified in certain other areas besides public housing or Section 8. You need income tax credit training. You need some staff to understand the development process. You need staff to understand the whole CMAP process. There needs to be some upward mobility. You need staff to go ahead.
I see if I can cut to the chase.
Chase is not.
Staff is capable of learning and being able to do this.
Yes.
And you're confident in that, because I'm confident in staff
Yeah.
being able to do it. I just want to make sure that we're on the
Yes,
same page.
yes. Well, in
Okay.
order for the staff to get to that, we got to bring our policies and procedures in compliance, so they have something to work with. So ain't no sense in me giving them more certification and still out of compliance.
I understand that. Yes, ma'am, Vice Chair.
And one of the things that we were going over is some of the staff were working outside of what their resume said they were capable of doing. And they weren't trained in it. They were doing other jobs. And a lot of them, like Interim Baker was saying, is they're being paid, but they haven't been trained to do the job. They were just placed in here to fill a void. They're very understaffed from what we were working off of to how we enlarged the organizational chart that we see they were on, whatever. So what he did was he read their resumes and placed them in their potential place where their resume said they were good at and what they were doing. And a lot of them are in, not a lot, some of them are in positions where they don't understand what they need to be doing. And they weren't fulfilling the duties, they were just having minimal assignments to do, not doing the extra step.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we got off a little bit of a take here, but so
No, she's right. Well,
I just want a little bit of clarity.
Yes.
This, again, for staff.
yes.
But I guess, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to review this information here. We'll have more questions for the, I guess, engagement letter when we come to that part of the agenda. Is there anything else you want to offer, Mr. Brooks?
No, I just, really quick, I would just say this. One of the things that even the largest housing authorities have problem with is the new rules handling veterans and veterans issues. So some of the things that other things done by training, they have nothing to do with your past. Everybody's getting caught up on the issues of how the laws are changed. So, part of that is not staff per se problem, it's just the evolution problem, the evolution of what's going on, what the laws and regulations are about.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Kimball, I believe we're moving to a presentation from Mr. Kimball. It's called Cycle? Visit.
F-I-S-I.
Good morning, Mr. Kimball.
Good morning, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. How are you today?
Good morning, how are you?
Fantastic. We're ready for your presentation, sir.
Well, thank you for having us. This is Brady Butler, my business partner. We have some slides, so we'll put up the slides and we'll go through our little presentation and we'll have time for questions if there are any. So I'm Keegan Kimball, and this is Brady Butler with the Kpk Consulting Group. You guys are, we're very happy to be with you. We got one of our favorite people, Mr. William Baker, who we've worked with for a number of years, so anything we can do to support him is always given us, has always brought us good projects to work on, and so we're excited about talking to y'all about Brunswick. Ready?
Yeah, hey, it's great to be here. In the essence of time, we're going to let Keegan do most of the presentation today, but if you have any questions for me specific, please let me know, and any channel if it is appropriate.
This slide. So Kpk Consulting Group, I started in 2013 after I left corporate America. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm also a financial services lobbyist by training and experience as well, capital staffer. Do a lot of work in DC, but we created Kpk Consulting as a conduit or as a facility for nonprofits and underserved programs and institutions. So again, I'm a lawyer, came to DC in the early 90s, worked on Capitol Hill, worked for firms, worked for a lot of financial services companies. We have built out what we call an economic empowerment platform for our clients. So basically, we represent a bunch of nonprofits, other organizations, and we create programmatic solutions and other sorts of opportunities for them to either help their constituencies or to move forward on programs they've accomplished. So through that process, with our clients, we partner them with other nonprofits. So we have about 7 nonprofits under our umbrella, and they all partner with other groups, people with towns, Black Mayors of Arkansas are part of our coalition. We have other organizations like the CBA, the Credit Builders Alliance, where companies, we have a couple of school districts in our platform where we help them work on advancing the needs of their kids. We are very much connected to the government in a bunch of ways. So Congress, from Congress to the White House to local elected officials, we work across in about 20 states with the groups that we work with. Great points. This is where we think about policy and advocacy. So advocacy, as I would say, advocacy is a function of strength, which is a function of numbers. So with an organization like Brunswick, you have a very stable and sort of strong need for your community that you represent. And we would look at solving or working with your issues both legislatively. So that means both state, local, and federal, and then the policy objectives. And the key in any of these situations is the nature of the ask. So what we're really good at is coming up with an ask that will get you to the yes that you need. So we know how to structure the conversation, we structure the requests and your needs in a way that you can get money. A lot of times people come to Congress, especially Congress, and ask for things in a sort of big picture method that doesn't allow for Congress to really help you or the agency to really help you. We're very good at delving into that and figuring out the nuanced issues that you have that we can then find solutions for, that the agencies can then fund or push in the right direction. We're also very good at media. I'm regularly published in media on op-eds. In fact, Brady I don't know if you can pull up the one we just did. Last week we got published in Newsweek on a housing issue. I'm talking about the Biden housing mortgage, GSE, mortgage lending process. You can find that, Brady.
Yeah, just a second. Just keep on doing this.
So we're very good at media. One of the things I know we've talked with Mr. Baker about is chronicling your issues and your history, coming up with the case studies to be able to tell your story to policymakers. Part of that, there we go. So this op-ed got published last week. We actually we've been published in a number of areas in this space, but this is the most recent. And again, we would like to be able to tell Brunswick's story, the housing authority story, in a way that is both compelling and effective and efficient. All right, but you can take that back off. The other thing on that list is on the chart you see is policy and think tank initiatives. We've written several white papers on issues. We did one on housing last year.
Yeah, I've got it right.
So this is just, I won't make you read the whole thing, but it's about 30 pages long. But we wrote a paper dealing with discrimination in housing and mortgage lending over the past 100 years that we then published and circulated and worked with a bunch of academics. We work with academics around the country, economists and others on putting forth plans and solutions for communities. It's not
Yeah, keep on, sorry.
So this is a high-tech solution to mortgage lending that we've been promoting over the last few years. work with non-bank lenders and talking about discrimination with housing and in other parts of the economy. Let me take that for you. So I just want to give you guys a sort of frame of reference for the levels of work that we can produce, that we will produce for you to make sure that when we go to HUD or EPA or NTIA, for instance, we're usually at the cutting edge of what the government's doing. So, for instance, later this week we're going to have a roundtable with the head of NTIA, or the president of NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Infrastructure Administration. His purview is over broadband distribution, and you may or may not have heard, but NTIA now has a $60 billion broadband fund that they're trying to produce. They've been instructed to actually spend the $60 billion over the next year and a half or so. And so we're working with a bunch of entities to make sure they try to get their fair share of that money for their communities. And obviously the Housing Authority would be a place where a couple $1 million should be spent helping you build out broadband for your residents. Next slide, right? I don't want to belabor all this. Representation, especially federal representation, is an art, not a science. We do this a lot, so sometimes it's hard for me to tell people what they know, what they don't know, or fill in the blanks. But we've created all kinds of programs. So we look here at the program we created, the Dream Creators, which is our workforce program. We started that from scratch as a way, working through some of our federal connections. I was working on a lobbying project, and they was having a hard time finding minority workers. So we created a workforce program that we now have expanded to several states, helping organizations and companies find the workers they need and taking advantage of the Department of Labor project of funding, et cetera, to do that. We also have a small business empowerment project that we've helped several, probably 10 or 12 minority women small businesses get started or grow. So those are just two little programs that we could bring to Brunswick and help our residents as you try to help them improve and graduate to the next level. We also have several initiatives through our think tanks that we run. So the housing initiative is a social paper. We have a bunch of health equity. We work with a bunch of pharmaceutical companies. We do events around the country at different locations to help people take better care of their health, especially underserved populations. We're big on the tech. We've written a paper on facial recognition and artificial intelligence, and how African Americans, particularly African Americans, but other underserved communities should be taken advantage of or being part of the future of the country. And then our economic empowerment initiative is all about making sure people take advantage of the grant money that's available and working with companies who are looking to increase their workforce participation of underserved people. There are 10.5 million full jobs in America. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And then we've done some voting rights initiative stuff. Task force, we have a housing task force, which surprise kind of fits what you guys are doing. And that's why we work with paper, a lot of different organizations on different components of housing and home ownership and or income-based housing. Go ahead, next one. We regularly work with members of Congress. We have 3 bills currently pending for different clients in Congress right now. Obviously, we have access to the executive branch. In fact, a couple of former employees of mine who are working in the White House as we speak. We work with a lot of agencies, HUD, NTIA, as I mentioned, EPA, Department of Education, even a little bit with the Justice Department. Stakeholders. Did I disappear? Brady, am I still on?
Yeah, did the slide disappear?
You guys disappeared from my screen.
We can hear you.
We can still hear you and see you.
Oh, okay, okay. I can't see the screen. There we go. Sorry about that. It disappeared. So we work with, again, a number of NCLC is one of our clients, NCAA, National Collegiate Sports Organization, one of our clients. AARP, the retirement, the 60+ group is one of our clients. We work with Blue, which is a small tech firm dealing with, startup tech firm dealing with ag tech, artificial intelligence and tech in agricultural space. We work with the Homeless Coalition of Dallas, work with a couple of workforce programs, and then one big one called Target Evolution out of Dallas. We've also worked with the Halifax County School District on helping them create workforce programs. And we work with Duke Energy on workforce as well. We work with a group called SoyMet. They had some EPA issues, and we helped them. They were a green energy program. And then obviously we've got PHYSIC and AOF, which are our mainstays in terms of opportunities for research and programmatic uplifting of communities. Ready? Our approach to all of this is to be dynamic and flexible. So we're always refining the issues that we're working on. So once we come in, we do the analysis, we write the sort of the white paper or the case study about where you stand, where you are, how you got here, where you want to go. Then we start trying solutions, and those solutions will take. They'll ebb and flow, right? Congress, especially at the congressional and appropriations and federal budgeting level, those things ebb and flow based on priorities. So last year we were working a lot on indoor growing because there was a lot of money potentially being spent on indoor growing. In fact, we got $2 million extra dollars put into the budget for greenhouses for some clients, our indoor growing clients. We think that Brunswick is primed for a lot of resources to be put into what you're doing. There's so much from solar panels to revitalization to workforce to potentially broadband expansion that we think will be helpful. HUD has a big mission statement to do more in this space, and we think that you guys are primed for that. So again, our next steps, if we're brought on to finalize a contract and then review your current situation, do a case study, develop the goals and the asks, and then have this comprehensive plan that is flexible, and then we'll start working with stakeholders and others. And we don't even know who your member of Congress. We haven't looked to see who your member of Congress is yet, but once we figure that out, we'll work with them, and we will push forward aggressively. A lot of this becomes shoe leather once we get past all of this. It's all about staying in front of people and working, like having you guys come to DC, maybe do a roundtable or a couple of staff briefings. We may actually, because we have so many housing issues, we may make you part of a housing platform where we come in and explain to Congress all the things that need to be changed in housing policy, or how housing policy could be more effective for small housing authorities like Brunswick, right? And maybe we even get someone to do a piece of legislation that would provide across-the-board funding for smaller organizations, smaller towns, and smaller housing authorities that can be more impactful. So those are the ideas that we have. We haven't, we've got to spend some time talking with y'all and going and assimilating ourselves into your thought processes. But that's Kpk Consulting, and that's what I think that's what William, when he called us, that's what he was looking for us to talk about, and that's what we got. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Board, do you have any questions?
I can't hear you, sir.
I said thank you, Mr. Kimball. I'm gonna ask the board to ask if they have any questions.
Okay, great.
Madam Vice Chair.
But if we bring, all
We
of
can't
you
hear you.
on, if we bring all of you on to help us, bring our housing authority up, do you come with a warranty after you finish in case something happens and we need some understanding?
I'm sorry, can you put the microphone closer? I couldn't.
I asked the question to all of the people representing here in different capacities that's gonna help us move forward. If we bring you on, do we get a warranty
after you finish helping us for for an allotted amount of time. So if anything comes across that we don't understand or we need help with implementing, can we call you back?
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. We won't leave you high and dry. That's a fair question, yeah.
So I have a question. So it sounds like can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now, yes.
So it sounds like what you're proposing is this sort of narrative that gives some context to the housing authority, the context of the area, and sort of the needs. And I'm curious, when you have done this for other entities similar, what do you have a dollar value amount of what those agencies were able to bring in as a result of your work?
You know, we hardly ever tie the two together that way, and it's not necessarily fair to. I can give you a number. So I would say that, you know, several $1 million over the course of the projects have come in. Like I said, the ag project, you know, to $2 million went into, got added to the USDA budget for this one project. You know, but you know, we like to think of it. Once we start this, you know, we will start to ask, again, based on the size of your budget, will determine the size of your what you can ask for Congress from, right? So, for instance, if you have a $30 million a year budget, you can anticipate maybe 5 to 10% being added if we come through this process. But if you have a $3 million budget, then you're not going to get $5 million added. So it's not really everything's relative to what you start where you start.
Well, then what would you say would be the greatest value add to this process then?
For you guys,
Yes.
being a part of all the different funding. So communities are being like, I do know, for instance, we checked and you guys have got about, I forget, it was $10 million, was it $10 million you guys got out of the CARES Act or the COVID money? I forget the number yet. It was something, it was a relatively small amount of money, but you're a relatively small community.
700,000, I think.
Was it 700,000? I think 700,000. So it was less than $1 million went to your community out of the COVID money. We're thinking, we've been complaining as an organization through a bunch of different states that minority and underserved communities were not getting their fair share of that kind of money. So for instance, we're talking about this broadband, there's $60 billion in this broadband, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't, I mean, you probably hadn't even heard of it. If we weren't part of it, without us, you might get zero of that money, or maybe you get $1 million of that money. I think we can expand your potential to maximize those kinds of resources. Same with HUD. HUD's sitting on a bunch of money. I was just on a call with the credibility alliance, because HUD's got money they want them to spend to make sure rental payments get counted on your credit report. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of different things that we bring to them just because we have access to what's going on the cutting edge that you may not otherwise see.
Understand. Thank you.
Commissioner Dickerson, do you have a question? Speaking of the, Mr. Kimball, speaking of the broadband, and I guess this is a two-part. You mentioned the funds that's available, yes. But let me start with our interim, Mr. Baker, with our current property physical condition. How does broadband fit into that?
Well, so for us, it's holistic, right? So the quality of your units are several pieces of this. Painting the walls, make sure the plumbing's fixed, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also going to the next level. From our standpoint, because this money's going to get spent now, we don't have the luxury of waiting until you've done everything else to do this. So we have to do it all at the same time.
Okay, and Mr. Baker, I guess this would have to come into like new construction, or as we rehab existing units?
Right now, as we rehab existing units, so your rehab budget's gonna really kind of go out the roof, because our units were really structured like you build a parking deck. So we got to decide how we want to proceed with that, and so each unit's gonna have to be upgraded and meet current regs and regulations. My whole idea for the broadband was make this a broadband hub for Brunswick Glenn County, which means that's gonna bring in revenues and resources, into the agency, and also gonna create jobs and opportunities in training, working along with, Mr. Edwards, who's also over the development and capital development. So if we structure this right, we'll be in a position to be one of the, to be a model for this nation. Like Mr. Kimball has already stated, well, I don't have to go that, I can go to the SPLOST meeting that I went to last night. Public housing, we don't have a spokesperson for public housing community. We don't have, basically you don't have a spokesperson, well, I don't want to go that far. You don't have a spokesperson for public housing. But so since we don't have a spokesperson, we're gonna create our own spokesperson, and we want Glenn County and those decision makers to actually come to, bring them to our table, since we're not coming, then we're not being invited to their table.
Well, let me ask this question for a little more clarity. I guess this would be from both parties. If those funds are appropriated and we somehow get these funds, can they, and I just need clarity here. I know we have our capital funds, and that allows us for years of planning to do specific things. Can these funds be similar, as in they've been appropriated to us? We don't really need to put them into existing, but we are planning on building, rebuilding, or building new construction, and we'll be able to use them then. Again, very similar to our capital fund projects. Is that possible?
So, I will say that you're asking me the question. The answer is I don't know the answer to that question at this point. We had that hasn't come up in any of the conversations. But interesting enough, when we had the call with HIA on Friday or Monday, we can ask them that question. I mean, that's a fair question. I don't know the answer to that, but then we can definitely ask. And there might be a way for certain people to get, if you get the money approved, the spending time can be pushed out. You know, but I don't know the answer. We haven't asked that question before, so that's a good question.
Yeah, it's, for us, from the agency standpoint, it's an infrastructure question. And so, right now, I'm just trying to get us to be part of the broadband team, be part of the initiative, and to be identified as a broadband community. And if we can get that, then we can get to the next phase. Yes, Coach Chair.
So this is my question off of that. He said that if the money is available now, we can't wait for that broadband. So I guess the question is, if we get it now, would it affect once we do, say we use Glenville, for instance, we put broadband in there now. When we redevelop it, would it have an effect of transferring that broadband from Glenville now to what we're going to make in the future?
Well, so think of broadband. It's one of the two ways from a planning standpoint. It's an infrastructure. It's an infrastructure. They're gonna lay a cable, and so regardless of what we do, we're gonna have to get we'll have to get permits and things of that nature, and we're gonna have to get some sewer work to identify where those cables are, so that as they demo and building back, that you don't cut into those cables. There's so much technology out there with broadband. Once we become a broadband hub, there are so many other ways that technology and equipment that's out there that we can purchase through the broadband money, and there are ways that we can lay that broadband on top of the surface, which means that you don't have to disturb the ground. And now everyone's going to, and that's, you talking about hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars in savings if we do that. Everyone's going to come to us using our equipment, want to use it and hire us out to use our equipment, which means we're going to train our people. We're going to train our people to operate that equipment, and that's revenues into, to bring revenues in. But there's so much we can do, but let's get step one done so we can become
Mr. Gordon, just make sure I'm clear. When you're speaking of broadband hub, the housing authority would own that cable. The housing authority would
No, we'll be an agent for, we'll be an agent, and we'll be a training center. We'll be the one that actually leading that discussion. Now, who owns that cable? I think you had to give that back to the public, because it comes to public use. I think, if I remember, planning 30203, once it's like a developer, once you put it in, it becomes utility. Now, there are ways that we can lease that if it's on our property, but that's a legal issue. So that's something that's down the line. But there is way, I know where you're going with it.
Yeah,
So it's possible,
my little
yes.
hamster's just going crazy right
Yeah,
now,
I
I'll
know
tell you
it.
that one.
Yes, sir. So it's possible. I just know the legalities of that.
Mr. Brooks, you had a comment or a question?
I think Mr. Kimball's about to hit it, because it's about the inclusion program and the fact that when an area is not affected or not getting the benefit of the broadband program, it's already baked in the cake in terms of how it's set up, that if you want to have the capabilities and you make the application and you show you're gonna have how you're being beneficial to the community, but it's a whole long process, that's how you, and the issue is, how many communities are actually gonna apply for the money? And so Keegan's kind of going right to it right there with what he's putting on board, so I'm kind of stepping on what he's about to say.
Go ahead, Keegan.
Mr.
I'm
Kimball?
sorry, I couldn't hear the last person speaking. I couldn't hear what they were saying.
It was me, Keegan, it was Charles, and I was saying that your post, you kind of stole my thunder, because you're going into the inclusion program and the fact that it's an original $65 billion plan that's being laid out, and then there's objections that you can raise, and how those objections and how you bring in, but you're listing what the actual proposal is, so I'll let you have at it, my friend.
No, that's a good. I tried. I didn't know we were tag team. I would have waited. You didn't tell me you were. So I threw this out there when I said the broadband is happening now. They're going through this process now. I don't believe you don't have to have the money spent by September. You don't have to have a plan by September. I mean, it's not. You need to be in the game to make sure you're on the list to get the money. But it's going to take some amount of time for the agencies to move the money out. And we'll be able to plan together that will work for you. So don't panic. The number one, as Charles will say, I told Charles all the time, the number one thing is making sure you get the money, because you're in the mood for the money, because the money's gonna get spent. So I think I would not burden yourselves with all of that stuff right now, because it'll drive you crazy. The number one thing is be on the list to get the money. And that's what we're trying to build. And then we'll figure out, we'll put they'll approve or disapprove plans, and we may have to, amend the plan that we send, but we'll work that part out. But getting on that list, because trust me, you just wrote a proposal for both underserved people in Minnesota and for a program for people in California. Neither of them got funded, right? The governor said to them, no minority people have asked for any of this money. You have $10 billion. This is not work. This is not broadband. This is COVID money. The government said, the governor said to them, hey, no black people have asked for this money or minorities have asked for this money, so we have to put a program together. They come back to me and they say, the people that we work with said, hey, not only did the governor not tell us no, they didn't even respond, right? So in this new process with the NTIA, as Charles was alluding to, they've changed that process so that the governors can't ignore you going forward. And so if the governor ignores us, then we can go to NTIA and put together our protest, and then NTIA can contract with us directly if we're not successful, or if we don't think of it. So there's a lot going on. This is why we're so big on this one, because they've learned the lessons from the COVID, where people weren't, where states are hoarding. I mean, Arkansas has about $8 billion. Minnesota has about $12 billion. California may have $20-30 billion in unspent money, even though there are communities with huge amounts of need, right? So we are focused in on that, and Charles knows. And there's all this infrastructure money coming. There's another $1.2 trillion in infrastructure money coming out. That a place like the Housing Authority should be looking for their opportunities to get some of that money for things you may need. So that's why I said don't bog yourself down with some of the details, because we just got to get on the list for the money. That's the first step. Did I answer your question? Did I answer the question?
I think so. And what's the deadline for this asking for the money?
We're gonna have a call with NTIA this week or next week, to find out exactly what the process is, but I know that the states themselves had a deadline to submit their intent to apply this week. So the state of Georgia, if they wanted the broadband money, they had to apply, they had to send a note to NTIA this week that they were planning to apply for it. And then there's several months worth of application process that goes into it. And then they have to certify that they've met with a community group. So, if we come on, one of the first things we will do is reach out to your state broadband office to make sure they know that Brunswick Housing Authority wants some of this money. So that they're forced then to check in with us. The state is forced to check in with you all along the way to make sure that they can report back to NTIA that they are taking care of their communities.
And Mr. Kimball and Mr. Baker, I think the other piece I wouldn't wanna miss from this is we certainly, like, money makes impact, right? And so the idea of the need to improve the outcomes around your workforce development programs and what the ability of broadband would do for those communities. So if there's anything that you wanna share, it doesn't have to be in this context, but I'm very interested in knowing what you believe the impact would be for the particular populations you're looking for to improve. The internet gives access to learning, right?
Right,
And gives
yes,
access to employment in different ways, and so I just don't wanna miss that from the conversation.
Well, I mean,
Educational, definitely, educational resources, for sure.
Right.
There's a lot of, children, young.
Keita, I don't know if it helps, but I put up our information sheet, and it shows that there's several billion available for things besides physical fiber lines and connections. There's training. One of the things they don't talk about here is, whether it's youth or, adults or elderly people, there's programs that can help them learn about broadband and how to participate in it. Because it's all about understanding and being able to participate, or else you're gonna be kind of farther and farther behind the modern economy.
Yeah, so the broadband program there's 5 different pieces. Obviously the biggest piece is the build out, but there are the smaller programs for what you call a soft skill or upskilling. They call it Navigator. So in theory, Brunswick may be able to apply, the Housing Authority may be able to apply for 3 or 4 of these different grants, 3 or 4 of these different pots of money as we put together our request.
Okay, great. Ms. Cooper, you were making a comment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most importantly, just educational resources, for especially the children, everyone in general, but especially, the children, reading, learnings, I think most importantly, that's what it would bring.
Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
Mr. Kimball has a list of different grants and programs. And my concern right now is if we bring him on, are we gonna have somebody on staff that will keep abreast of the different programs and grants that are outside of Housing Authority so we can tap into these and meet these deadlines? Yes.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah.
Do you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Just real quick, I told Mr. Baker I got 11 o'clock on some of these. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Mitch Edwards. I'm the interim director of capital development, compliance, and all that stuff. That's why I'm here. I'll be the link between the Brooks Brothers, Kpk, anybody else that comes aboard to help get us from 1975 to 2022 and heading toward 2040.
That's right, man.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, don't be scared, don't be alarmed. Brunswick Housing has never had this before. Okay, this position was created so that when we do get everything in order and your warranty is that when they leave, we want somebody here
Yes.
that's on top of it, on
Yes.
board with it, and can still reach back out
Yes.
with the relationship we build with these entities, and make sure that, you know, we're moving forward, we're progressing, we're on the inside of what's coming, and that, you know, we want to be a model.
Yes.
You know, we're not here just to, you know, say, hey, Brunswick came up on this score and there can still be a housing authority. You know what I'm saying? We want to be able to affect Glenn County. That's what housing authorities around the nation, around the world are doing. I mean, right now, we're in this little circle, and there's a whole lot out there that we need to tackle. But yeah, going forward, as interim, I'm here, like Mr. Baker, you know, hoping for an extension. We get to that unlike Mr. Baker, I'm a product of public housing. You cut me, I bleed public housing. Okay, this is my opportunity to give back to these youth in Brunswick. So we're going to create this network. This position is in charge of handling that network. So when we come in this gathering, you got an informed report on what we're investing in. And like I said, it's personal for me. So we're gonna make sure it's done. We wanna make sure it's done right. We wanna make sure it's sustainable. We wanna build on it. And we want, you know, to be a success to where, you know, instead of having to wait to see if we get invited to the table, we're building another table. That's what this is all about. And with that, I digress.
Oh, correction. I came from public housing to Tuscaloosa housing.
Anyway, those people that have met me, they know I'll lighten it up a little bit just to, you know, get you to open up and relax, and then we'll get in there and make sure we get what we need. But I just wanted to say something before I leave. But, you know, rest assured that, you know, we're here to build for the future. This is not about just, you know, right now, like I said, we got to come up to get to where we should have been. But we're, you know, trying to make sure that we can go where we need to go once that's done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Director, I don't actually see anything in here based for Mr. Kimball.
I know I have that contract, and I have that contract. I'm going to ask the board to give me permission in a contract for the Kimball.
That's
Brooks. Yeah, but I don't see anything for these gentlemen.
No, I got it right here, and I
have it, but
well, one of the problems is that, you know, unfortunately, your internet doesn't work appropriately, and I'm stressing my IT guys out in that office. So we need broadband. So I got the contract. So you want to? I understand. I'm gonna be. I already got Miss Dyer that loves me, so I know you're gonna love me too. But I have. But one of the things that they bring to the table that's gonna have an immediate impact is their initiative to create job and opportunity for our young adults.
you mentioned something about electrical poles and wires.
Yeah, lineman program, pilot program.
Pilots? What do you mean by pilots?
Airline pilots.
Airline pilots.
Airline pilots. One of the we focus on programs that don't require 2 to 3 to 4 year contract, which provides a decent wage, more a livable wage, not. And so, and one of the reasons that you had a lot of flight cancellation was the lack of airline pilots.
Over here, over the 4th of July.
Fourth of
They're
July,
traffic control.
traffic control.
Yeah.
Well, we
They're
have
traffic
now,
control.
so we have relationships with institutions and corporations that were, and companies that would hire people to come through our training, through our process.
So you're saying that, excuse me, you're saying, Mr. Director, you're saying that there's a great potential for our residents who are of age to begin these career choices?
Yeah, they're not. We're gonna provide them for it. And so Mr. Kimball has, we got enough space to set up a lineman pole, they can bring the trucks and they can teach them that. We would, need to team up probably another source to help them get their CDLs and things of that nature. But it's a whole lot of money, so you're looking at $6,000 to $80,000 starting up. During hurricane season, they can make anywhere from 100 up to 4. I know them to make $400,000 a year in overtime. Mr. Kimball would come in, would do the presentation, he would invite the professionals in, and then they'll start interviewing them on the spot for the class, and we'll find ways to get them scholarships to go through those classes. And they're not expensive, but when you don't have the money, a Big Mac is a lot of money. So we have found
$20 is not a whole lot of money until you don't have it.
Yeah, yes, sir. So that's kind of where we are. So we got a lot of moving parts, and how that impacts our score. Now we have initiatives that we can build on the initiatives that we have, expand on the initiatives that we have, but we also can start getting the results that we have that can go into our report and we can pull those scores up. Because I'm really only looking for 5 points, so to give me some breathing room, give the staff some breathing room. And so we can say that, hey, this is where it's at and this is what we got in place. It's a strategy that's moving forward. You'll see part of it in the organization plan. So there's a reason that I got people inside and I got people working outside.
I want to say one thing about the first thing, just because some William knows whenever he starts that thing is like near and dear to my heart. Like it's the thing that I do that is the most not only impactful but the most rewarding thing that everyone talks about. And William was actually at that first meeting we did on the workforce thing back in North Carolina. And the first kid we got hired, he was now 24 years old, I think, and he's making $83 an hour without any college, and he's already bought a 30-acre farm in where he lives in North Carolina. It changed his life. But everyone talks about gun violence in America, and we're always saying that they'll do anything for gun violence. They'll do millions of dollars for gun buybacks. They'll come up with any kind of dance programs. The one thing they won't do is get underserved kids jobs, right? So every kid that we've gotten a job is no longer a potential victim or purveyor of gun violence, right? Because they're working every day and moved on. And for all the money we spend on crime prevention, we spend half of that on workforce. We would eliminate 80% of the red. Now, if you know what to do about mass shootings, we're talking about the individual street violence stuff. That is a function of jobs, and this program we created is focused on regular kids. So if you're a STEM student, there's lots of help for you. You go to college or be an engineer or whatever. Or if you've been in trouble, there's some programs that help you not get back in trouble. If you're just a regular kid who got up every day, went to school, and has a B-, C- average, no one does anything to help you. And that's what our program is. This program is designed to do. And it's, for the skill we've been able to bring it to, it's very successful. We've never had a kid graduate who didn't get a job. Some of them are no longer retail linemen, some of them moved on to be just regular truck drivers, some have started their own businesses, but they've all had careers. So the numbers are this is one of the things that I'm most proud of in my second career. I call this my second career because I was a corporate lobbyist for years. This is my second career, and it's like the most rewarding thing I get to do on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Any further questions for Mr. Kimball at this point? Any further questions from staff or students? We have Vice Chair.
Once they come on board, how often will we evaluate whether they're coming up to the needs that we propose to them?
I would imagine that somewhere during negotiation, contract negotiation, we can put in a performance measurement and make sure that that's something that we can hold them accountable and give them certain goals to meet as well.
You repeat that question again?
Oh, I said that once we if we hire them on, how often will we do a performance evaluation on them to see if they are completing the task and plan that we propose for them to do?
Oh, they're gonna be, this is almost gonna be almost like a daily, weekly evaluation.
Okay.
We got to get this started. And one thing that, one of our biggest attributes is that we got character. You know, when I say part of anybody's character, you know, you political, moral, and ethical, you good. And when that's, when you start shaking in those areas, you kind of have to check yourself, have people around you to balance yourself. Whenever we leave an organization or authority, we stay in touch with. I think you always on the call. I call some people that when I got started, so I still listen to my mentors. I've been in this business a long time. So you will have checks and balances. We're gonna have goals and objectives. Some of them will have to be identified and developed and expanded. What we want to do is create opportunities as well for our community. And we're going to need fair-minded white people. I don't mind saying civil rights have been successful without fair-minded white people. So we just need fair-minded, integrated people on this team that's willing to work with us. And I don't mind Attorney Harvey calling me and say we need to go walk in the park and hit me on the back of my head, or Mr. Cooper hit me on the back of my head and say, what are you doing? You know, so and likewise, so we have to create a partnership that we can trust. And one of our goals in the team that we're assembled is to help this county heal. Help this county heal. And so for too long, communities have seen black and white and they just scream. My mom always told me when I was in educated food, I was always had education. You smart, but you still a food. My mom don't think white, don't think black, don't think green, because green is gonna balance the system. You're gonna have people on the inside of people. I ain't worried about those. I'm worried about a fair-minded individual across the board. And I need to toot one of the staff horns right now. I need to toot Ms. Cooper's horn, because Ms. Cooper is really allowing the day-to-day while we put this together. And this has been a very intense, fast, very aggressive, and progressive process where I've been challenged by the chairman and some of the board members to make this happen. And how do we get there? And so I got to give Ms. Dyer I got to clap, because this is what we can do. She always got me to a yes. And so one of the things that I do want to say is that Commissioner Bailey, I have one thought of coming on how to, one issue that we had immediately, and I was trying to eradicate that, but she came up with a better solution. I really want to use the rest of this month for the board to get to know the staff to know the board. But that was becoming too intense, so she came up with, hey, why don't we just come in one time, we meet everybody, and everybody's done, and so we can move forward and let you go ahead and do what you do. But the purpose was that, so that the commission, character of the staff, so when residents are calling, they're like, no, that ain't, if someone says something, we like, okay, well, you know who to call, to get the resolution. So we need to do that. So I want to break down those barriers so we can become a working family. And so we can start setting this table. We build this table here. And yes, it's going to cost. But at the end of the day, when we finish, you know, like I tell you, Chairman Kid all the time, you got more than an executive director. You know, so we got somebody to care. So back to your question, we're people of compassion, we're people of character, and anybody can point the finger, this wrong, that wrong. Okay, bring me a solution. I got a solution, you got a solution. Let's work out a solution together. That's the solution to human works.
One final comment, and then we've got to move on.
Yes.
So I think
Commissioner Seuss.
this might be, a joint, I don't know, it seems like both of their presentations are sort of aligned in terms of Mr. Kimball and, Mr. Brooks. So I'm curious about in your process, I'm sorry, Mr. Baker, in your process, have you thought about where it would make sense and appropriate to have a resident voice alongside this process, again, where it makes sense and where it's most important? And I'm thinking particular about starting a lot of programs that may not be informed by what people need or want. So I'm just curious, in your previous work in other municipalities, have you had the influence or insight of the folks that are most impacted by what we're trying to do?
That's and answer your question, yes.
Okay.
To answer your question, but that's a pie. You got maintenance, you got management, you got resident, you got resident association, and you have the board. You're missing a critical piece, which is what the Brooks Brothers, along with some other staff, help us get our resident associations up and going.
Okay.
So yes, they're very critical because the resident association, the ones that I've been associated with, they were part of interviewing potential tenants before and made recommendation. Now they couldn't encroach on the management side, but when there were some, like a lot of the associations that we have, and we had a resident association, then they got a voice, and they can go and we can turn some of this stuff, we can turn some of these opportunities and create opportunities for them for school is coming up, you know, machine, clothes, computer, you know, resources, bringing private sponsors to help kids, you know, buy for lunch, like, you know, for lunch and meals and cleats and stuff like that. But you don't have a resident association. So we had to come in at a different way. So we're looking for ways to bring, let me put it without spilling the bag, we're looking for opportunity to bring people down who has committed resources to us, but we don't have a venue yet, Mr. Kidd.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so again, apparently we got some additional stuff here to discuss as far as anything contractually wise will go. Mr. Harvey, most of our contracts are discussed usually in executive session, right? Just for
again.
Okay. So okay. So thank you, Mr. Kimball. We will have Mr. Baker in contact with you with a decision moving forward. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Nice meeting all of you.
Nice meeting you too. Okay, moving on. Excuse me. It's public meeting. Okay. Thank you. Moving on our agenda here. Let's see, we're so out of order. Is Mr. McCullum present?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go on to the professional transition audit from Mr. Earl McCullum.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Earl McCullum. I represent MCM Group. We are a professional CPA firm. My partner is Greg Biggs. Could not be here today yet. At hospital to go to, doctor's appointment to go to. But wanted to talk to Mr. Baker and need to try and do some discovery, maybe some review of your financial processes, your internal controls, things of that nature. Need to get understanding when you had your last audit, official audit completed and done. So we wanted to come in and kind of do a financial review of what you currently have, your current financials, and your previous audits to kind of see where we are with your, with the standings of your financials. So I think the first thing is more of the discovery, because I have requested some information that's going to be sent to me to get an understanding of where we are with AHA, but Brunswick Housing Authority. Our experiences is with housing authorities. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We work with Albany, City of Atlanta, Montezuma, different municipalities and housing authorities, and so this is kind of our sweet spot. So from my understanding is that there has not been a recent audit, and we need to get a good understanding of how things are flowing as far as the finances are concerned, and making sure the internal controls are where they need to be. So we sent Mr. Baker some information, and so this is again more of a discovery meeting, get an understanding of where we are and what we need to do to move forward as far as hopefully offering you guys a solution to better have internal controls and financial reporting, so you can, when it's time to do an audit, because your audit fees are based upon your condition of your books. If your books are not auditable, then you need to have an internal finance person, internal accountant, auditor, whatever, to get those books in order so an audit company can come in and actually audit the books and making sure that you're complying with the state. So, from that start, is any questions based upon?
We had an audit every year. We had one at the end of our last fiscal year, June 30th, 2021.
Okay.
And isn't our auditors,
Malcolm Johnson out of the land for.
Yeah, out of the land force.
At the land, okay. So I have not, okay, so that's, okay, that's great. So I would need to get those, we're coming in to do a discovery, do a review of financials, because there's an understanding that there may be some misappropriations possibly, or those internal controls need to be put into place. So we just want to do a discovery and a review about that information and about what we need to do if that is the case, then provide a transition for Mr. Baker to understand, so he feels comfortable that we have the financials in place going forward for the housing authority.
So this will be a professional audit?
Yes, this is more professional review. And I don't want to call it an audit, this is a review to make sure that your internal controls and things are being spent appropriately according to the budget.
I don't have an issue with that, because I know that Ms. Harris on that. So we see put at some procedures to assist that. Our organization chart, and everywhere I work, we always have an internal auditor on, so that we can as well work with the financial director, and they're gonna go ahead and this. That model works extremely well. And so we do need to add, anytime we have a new administration, there need to be a professional audit, a transition audit. So we document where one administration in with the next one starts. Brings accountability and protection for everyone, and really move forward in that vein. Without that, I put myself at risk for decisions that were made prior to me, dealing with contracts, dealing with allocations of funds, and I'm not saying anything against any staff, because I got to know financial direction. I have no problem with that, but I do know ultimately the decision was left up to the previous ED, and I'm gonna make my own mistakes. I don't need to inherit someone else's. At least them put held accountable.
That I can understand.
And they could be held accountable for someone else's mistakes. I don't got to inherit, but I need to know where we are.
So let me make sure I'm clear. Yet again, you're asking for opportunities for someone to come on as a consulting contract such and so forth?
He's gonna be, for, I don't know how long that's going to.
Yeah, we foresee, you know, now that I understand that there is an audit, and we can kind of look at what the previous audit looks like. And so we will do a 60 to 90 day kind of review to kind of see where we are as far as internal controls, if everything is up to par as far as acceptable spend, things of that nature. So if the audit from your last audit details that is correct, and we see for the previous year or two that all the expenditures have been done correctly, and everything is on, and everything is to the satisfaction of Mr. Baker, then yes, then you're clean. But we just want to make sure, we just want to give him the comfort that, hey, your financials look good, your previous, how long has the previous auditors been auditing your books?
Quite a few years.
Quite a few years.
Quite a few years.
Yeah, and
More
so
than 3.
more than 3. And so in those cases, and we have been in situations where auditors have been there in place for 4 years, okay, and have found that things were done incorrectly. So, and things funds were spent incorrectly. So, again, we just want to make sure and give Mr. Baker the comfort that, hey, we come in, books look clean, things are being spent appropriately. You have no issues here going forward. And this is when, if there's anything that we can add as far as internal controls, things of that nature to make it better, we can do that.
So also, not only are they protected, make me feel better, I have fiduciary duty to this agency and to this board to make sure that you all are covered financially and that we have done everything, as well as to Ms. Diary and things of that nature. So she has a secondary validation of what needs to be done. Go ahead, Ms. Price.
What we do here, because it's a one-man show here, finance, instead of me compiling all of the year-end information myself and submitting it to HUD every year prior to our audit.
Yes, ma'am.
What we do is we hire a consulting firm to come in. They're a CPA firm. They also do audits of other housing authorities, but they do consulting and fee accounting work.
Yes, ma'am.
And they come in and they take everything that I have put together and they review it and they do the submission part. This is like another check on what we're doing here. You know, having someone else review, who knows what they're doing, review my work. And also, it gives the auditors more comfort knowing that, because, you know, they've told me, we're gonna look at your stuff more carefully if we know that it's just you and you're submitting it all. But you've got another firm looking at it, reviewing it, and so we have that in place also. And they come every year, coming at the end of July.
Yes,
Am I ready? No.
And I understand and I appreciate that, Ms. Dyer, and for us, for where we are now, I need that even to be evaluated so we can get where we need to be. Now I understand it's a duplicate of responsibilities right now. It really is. And what Ms. Dyer is saying, that this is not necessary. And so, correct?
I just didn't know anything about it till now, and I'm just surprised by it, and plus about the misappropriations. I'm just curious to know what
maybe that's the wrong term, but just concerns about how things are being spent.
Let me see if I can help us move along. I'm going to refer this to the Finance Subcommittee for review, since that's their purview in particular. And since now I know officially that former Commissioner Kilgore is no longer a member of the Finance Committee, will you? Commissioner Sorrell, will you fill the position on the Finance Subcommittee with Commissioner Dickerson?
Let me say this before we move on. Misappropriation is not most definitely not the right term.
I'm aware.
Okay, so I'm not worried about Ms. Dyer.
Yeah.
So, but
Yes.
I understand what, if that, I'm not, it's just like, I know my mom can cook turnip green, so I'm good with that. So, but we do need a transitional beyond the other audit, for we can start clean.
Let's refer this over to the Finance Subcommittee.
Okay.
Which is Commissioner Dickerson and Commissioner Sorrells now. Thank you so much for volunteering.
And can I have Ms. Dyer present at that, and from this point forward?
It will be up to them to determine who's president for the meeting. I'm completely okay with that. And then you guys can come back with a proper recommendation to the board. How's that sound?
Yep. I recommend that Ms. Dyer and myself be present, because I want the brain with me.
Okay, everyone comfortable with that? You have a comment, Madam
Yeah.
Vice Chair?
We can do it both ways with Mr. Rouse and Mr. Dickerson, but I see it like interim vacancies. It's like turning over your household to somebody new. And before you get stuck with what their baggage that was left behind, we just go to straight housekeeping so we can start off a clean slate. So we won't be pinpointed for anything that comes up in the future. Because we can't correct the staff, we can't correct maintenance, and not correct and check and audit the finances. So we have to do that because we're paying them, and plus that's what we're gonna need to separate ourselves with what may be still out and hasn't been brought in as a receipts accountable or payable and stuff. And so, like he said, it's not about misappropriations or anything like that. It's just doing our housekeeping before somebody new comes in to clear the dust with what was previously in the hands of other people. That's it.
Agreed.
So the other thing I would add to that is I think it's necessary to do that process in alignment with the policy review in some ways. So, we need to coordinate what that looks like. Because they impact one another. So yes, thank you. I will join the finance subcommittee.
You're very welcome. Okay, so we've had our presentation from Mr. McCullough. Mr. McCullough,
Yes.
thank you again so much
Thank you for having me.
for coming out with this and explaining your process. Again, refer it over to our finance subcommittee, and then you guys can figure and hash all that excellent stuff out. Moving on, we have another presentation from Sepia Transformation Partners, Mr. Paul Robinson, to discuss the grant conversion process. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Mr. Kiss. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
If you guys don't know, full disclosure, I met this gentleman at one of our conferences. I'm not sure which one it was.
It was the conference at St. Simon's, and I think it was with Gara.
Yes.
Commissioners Conference.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, Jekyll Island.
Jekyll Island, that's
Yes.
right.
It was
That's
you
right.
and Shelley. I can't remember her full name, but Shelley. I don't remember her.
Thank you for presenting my competitor. I appreciate that. How are you all doing? Good. I don't take this lightly, and I want to thank Mr. Kitts and Ms. Bailey. I get a chance to meet them and talk to them a lot about RAD. I do this since the RAD program came out in 2012, working with housing authorities. Again, my name is Paul Robinson. I just started a new company called Kpk Consulting Group just because of the RAD platform. I started in this business in 1999, working with National Equity Fund, which is a tax credit, affordable housing tax credit equity provider. And then I left there and went to work with a company called Vantage Development out of Fife, Alabama. I worked there for 12 years, did about 22 deals in the affordable housing tax credit space. In 2012, when RAD came about, my eyes lit up. I've never worked with a housing authority before in my life, but at the time I was really tired about going out trying to find new land when not a lot of land was zoned multifamily. Then if you ever go to a community that didn't want affordable housing in that community, that's an experience I think everyone should try to experience, especially if you have to speak In Gwinnett County, I went up there and everyone had on the red shirt. I was the only one that didn't have on the red shirt. I wish I had one in the car, and got ran out of that town, got ran out of Dublin and a couple other places like that. So I really got tired of just going and trying to find new land and then all of a sudden trying to develop housing. But the other side of it is when you develop the new housing and new construction, I would do that deal and then walk away after construction. So I never got a chance to interact with the residents or with the community on a long-term basis. When RAD came along, I started studying the President Obama's administration, had to kind of figure out a way, how do you get more money to public housing authorities? You know, the capital funding always goes ups and down, or in most cases it's decreasing. Right now, we're going to go through an uptick in capital funds. But that process made housing authorities very unstable in terms of how they will invest in their communities, and basically in capital improvement programs. And so RAD came along, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you all a PowerPoint presentation. I usually don't do this, but I think all the stuff that I heard today got me so excited, and I know I'm not going to be a linear thinker today. So if you can go to the Brunswick, and then go to the STP RAD full presentation. So again, RAD came around in 2012, and why did they come around? It basically came about because there was a $25 billion backlog at that time in terms of deferred maintenance throughout all the public housing authorities across the country. That's about 1.2 million public housing units across the country. And President Obama basically said that, hey, we've got to figure out a way to get more money to housing authorities. So what they did was they basically allowed for-profit developers and nonprofit developers in the affordable housing tax credit space to begin to partner with housing authorities in converting their programs from the Section 9 platform to the multifamily platform. And so that was huge. And then also, housing authorities in only a special cases were allowed to put debt on their developments. So what RAD did would now allow housing authorities to put debt on their program, on their properties, but what had to take place was you had a declaration of trust that had to be released from HUD to go through the multifamily platform. So, like I said, it was $25 billion backlog at that time. Housing authorities were losing properties from not being able to repair them and things like that. So if you go on and click to the next slide. So what was the solution, RAD? Go on to click to the next slide. And so in 2012, there were 60,000 units available as a RAD demonstration program. And then in 2014, it went up to 185,000. At that time, I was still working with Vantage Development. And the owner of Vantage Development said, I don't know any part of the government that's growing by 3 times the amount. That just clicked to me. I said, this is a program that's going to be around. Why? It seems like Republicans and Democrats like it. Why? On the far, maybe what you would consider to be the most conservative, fiscal conservative people, they would basically like it because what? It saves the government money. Over the last couple of years, it saved the government $7 billion. $7 billion, and that's probably low in terms of the estimate. In 2017, it went up to $225,000, and in 2018, it went up to 455,000 units available for RAD. It's still a demonstration program, but just recently I heard that they've lifted the cap, so now 1.2 million public housing units can participate in the RAD program. So that's huge right there. And I'm just going to give you a little analysis of the programs that have been around for public housing. In 1930, you had the Public Housing Act. That's when public housing started in the United States. 1965, you had HUD created. That's where you get your home money and CDBG money and things like that. 1986 was the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Development Program. Huge program, does most of the affordable housing throughout all of the country. And then in 2012, I put RAD right up there. When I first started talking to RAD about housing authorities always had the question, oh, here comes another program. And I couldn't confidently say to housing authorities, this is the way to go. Now, 10, 11 years later, I can literally say this is the way I think housing authorities should move in this space. Again, I say RAD doesn't stand for Rental Assistance Demonstration. RAD stands for Republicans and Democrats like it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying that when you're in that kind of sweet spot, that's where you want to be. From a financial standpoint, when I started doing RAD deals, they're the most secure deals that you can do. Why? You have project-based rental assistance, you don't have to worry about site control, and you also, housing authorities in Georgia have what's called pilots, property tax abatement. In other places, property tax assessors are going around taxing affordable housing tax credit developments right now. I'm on the Georgia Affordable Housing Coalition Board. We're constantly in the Supreme Court battling with them to try to make a caveat that affordable housing developments are not taxed like market rate developments. And that's a whole nother long story in terms of why they should not be taxed like that. But just remember, if you got rent caps, you don't have an unlimited amount, so you should have a cap on your property tax. That's the basic analogy there. So if you don't mind, can you flip to the next one? How is RAD funded? So basically, HUD has 3 current funding platforms. One, you have rent support through Section 8 project-based rental assistance or project-based vouchers. 2, you have operating cost subsidies, and then you have capital improvements. If you don't mind, click. So what HUD did is basically said, what we're gonna do is take this housing authority's capital improvements, operating subsidies, and roll it up into the rents. So what does that do? That guarantees project-based vouchers or project-based rental assistance for 20 years on that development. As a developer, I'm really excited about that. I don't have a market risk, and I don't have to worry about rents because there's such a dire need. I don't know what the waiting list is like this, but when I experienced housing authority up in Canton, the small housing authority, 144 units, they just cut down their waiting list, opening it back up, and 400 people applied for it. So we don't have a market problem when you're talking about converting to, and having project-based rental assistance or project-based vouchers on a development. If you don't mind clicking to the next one. So there's 4 ways to finance a RAD conversion. And I'm gonna tell you what took place early in the process. You see that no financing under capital funds? Basically, a lot of housing authorities went that way because they just wanted to get away from HUD. And we just thought that that was not a good way. It was not a holistic way of doing it. So a lot of housing authorities in Alabama, they had the most, what they considered to be RAD chapter awards at that time. And they ended up just converting to RAD. Now, some developments, they could do that. For example, neighborhood stabilization program money came out, and it was a town in Alabama, and I can't remember, it was a very small town. They got $20 million of neighborhood stabilization money. I talked to my the principal. He said, if you ever been in this town, $20 million could fund every street in gold. That's how small the town was. You know what I'm saying? So when they converted to RAD, it was no problem because they had enough money to basically do all the capital improvements. But if you do no financing, all you're doing is taking your capital funds and leverage with the project-based rental assistance, and that's usually around $5,000 to $10,000 of repairs. That's nothing. You know, you really didn't exhaust, I think, all the opportunities of this program. There's another way you can do it where you can use your capital funds and then also take conventional loan money. That's going to give you a little bit more money. How conventional loans work is you have your rental income, you have your expenses, then you have your net income. That net income carries a certain amount of debt that can be paid off, okay? So basically, a conventional loan will bring some more money. So you might be able to do $25,000 per unit on your construction. Well, because I'm an affordable housing tax credit, and I literally, like a hammer and a nail, I see everything from a development standpoint through low-income housing tax credits. The 4% and the 9% way of applying for credits, and that's a very complicated process. And one of the things that I would suggest is the board continue this education process on what that means, and I've got all kind of information on that. But the 4% way, you can probably do 4% with tax-exempt bonds. You could probably, at the time, people were doing anywhere between $25,000 and $55,000 per unit in terms of construction. And at that time, I thought $25,000 was great, but I did not know all the benefits that could take place. 9% credit, no problem. You can do new construction. You can do $85,000, $100,000 per unit of rehab. So my first deal was with Northwest Georgia Housing Authority. It was a 4% low-income housing tax credit deal. I don't know if any of you all know Ms. Hudson, but Ms. Hudson is a stickler. And she basically educated me on what's at stake here. And it's basically this. No, this housing is for the people, period. If you don't put people at the center of this, I don't even think you should be in this business, to tell you the truth. So what she did is she kept driving. So when I'm talking to her about doing $30,000 a unit, she said, no, that's not gonna happen on my watch. She was already putting $85,000 to $100,000 in the unit, and I was saying, Ms. Hudson, you're not leveraging this money right. She said, I don't mind. I'd rather have 5 or 6 units that are done extremely well, as opposed to 100 units that are not done well at all. In my mind, I couldn't even I couldn't really make sense of that. But in the long term, I understand her now, and I think that that's the right philosophy. If you wouldn't live there, you shouldn't expect anybody else to live there. And that was her motto right there. She drilled that into me so I can't tell you the battles that we had. Because also I'm trying to educate somebody on low income tax credits, which is a whole lot of documents to be signed and a whole lot of education. But it was on the fly. DCA came out with what's called a home NOFA, in which they allow developers to apply for home money. It was $20 million that they had in the coffer. Ms. Hudson had 174 unit development that basically I could not make the numbers work, because she wanted to do $85,000 per unit. So what I did was I basically divided the property in half, knowing that my construction cost was right around $4 to $5 million. So I went and asked DCA for $4.2 million. It was really throwing spaghetti up on the wall, but for some reason a lot of people didn't apply. Not only that, on February 14th, there was a snowstorm. We couldn't get the application in on time. But guess what? They delayed the application and gave us one more week. I'm fighting with Ms. Hudson trying to get documents signed at 11 o'clock at night in her office, but she just wasn't comfortable. So then that extra week allowed us to make the application, and DCA awarded us $4.2 million. The first deal that I ever did with 4% tax credits was an $85,000 per unit rehab. And if you have not seen these units, I'll send you pictures of them, and it's actually worth it. Rome is a long way from Brunswick, trust me.
Yeah.
But if you've ever been to Rome, you've got to go see her unit. She is open for the Housing Authority to go there. The next development that I started working on was with the LaGrange Housing Authority. The LaGrange Housing Authority basically had an executive director that basically was mentored by Ms. Hudson. So here I am again in this same thing in terms of, no, we're going to drive this home. The LaGrange Housing Authority's main priority was, how do we get our self-sufficiency programs up and running? Ms. Hurd even started a transportation system that now is the transportation system for the LaGrange, city of LaGrange. All her work in terms of her self-sufficiency programs are top-notch. She put all the money on there, so when I came in, the story was already told. So what I hear, Mr. Brooks, I heard the Kpk Group, all of them, they already talk about all the work that I was doing as a single person, trying to move a house before. I never dealt with, legal stuff and things like that. But when we're talking about connected community stakeholders, all the self-sufficiency programs, community transformation, our tagline in our company is called Housing as a Catalyst for Individual and Community Transformation. To tell you the truth, I could care less about the buildings. I believe people, if they're well inside, they can do it, they can live anywhere. But housing can be used as a catalyst because there's so much money coming down the pipeline. If we can go on to the next slide. But here's what I want to say. Here on the no financing, sorry, I'm going to run you crazy. Here's the less funding, there's the more funding. But that's really, really complicated. This is less complicated, but that's extremely complicated and competitive. Okay? I want to say that you live in the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia is one of the few states that has federal and state credits. What does that mean? Most states will give affordable housing developers 90 cents on the dollar. In Georgia, we get $1.50 on the dollar, meaning we can bring so much money. The state of Georgia also is very, very open with allowing housing authorities to apply for these credits. Other states said, hey, because of RAD, we don't want housing authorities to even apply because of the lobbying. Is it appropriate to say lobbying? Somebody told me I couldn't use that word. But because of the lobbying efforts of all the affordable housing developers in those states, they said, no, we don't want housing authorities to compete for those limited amount of dollars. Georgia is one of the fairest states in terms of allowing housing authorities to compete for those dollars. So I just wanted to say, you're in a great state. Yes, Mr. Kiss.
Can you run those dollar figures by me one more time?
Yeah.
90 cents on the dollar?
Yeah, it's very, very complicated. And if you don't mind, Mr. Kitts, what I'd like to do is go through this because the RAD process is one side of it, but then you also, because you're dealing with 4% low-income housing tax credits or 9% tax rates, that's a whole nother discussion.
Okay.
And it's extremely, extremely complicated. And one of the things that the Georgia Affordable Housing Coalition has not done, how do we make this a simple understanding, which are very, very complicated. And I'm going to show you something that I try to do when I'm teaching housing authorities throughout the state of Georgia. If you can go to the next slide. So basically what we're talking about is moving from a public finance, the way HUD finances it, to a public-private finance model. Okay, so there's certain kind of transitional things that you have to do with your staff. There's certain kind of understandings that you have to do in terms of the board. So we're really moving away from HUD onto a multifamily platform, just like any other affordable housing developer. Movement from HUD requirements to public-private requirements, movement from management of public housing to an affordable housing developer. Because of Ms. Hudson, the way we structured the deal, she's a co-GP in the development, she's a co-developer. Because it's so important to get the housing authority to be the developer of that particular city. I don't know if this is recorded or not, I'm probably getting in a lot of trouble, but most developers do not like what I'm saying. Because what I'm saying is, housing authority should be the number one developer of their particular city. Why? You live here. One of the main things that I had to struggle with Ms. Hudson was about, she said, the property managers that come in from affordable housing do a worse job than they do on their particular sites. And then I thought, we're like stepmothers and stepfathers coming in when we have to take over the management. We don't even know the residents. And I only work with small housing authorities. I don't work with the city of Atlanta. I don't work with the city of Augusta. I don't work with large housing authorities. So in small rural areas, the executive director and the staff, they grew up with many of the people in public housing and stuff. So there's a certain kind of relationship that I think is extremely important to hold there. And I'll tell you how that kind of mapped out. But we're moving from managing of public housing, which is traditionally due to affordable housing developer. Perspective, private companies only concerned with profit. I want to get that out. The way of the future, I believe, is going to be and I'm going to give you an example, is benefit corporations. Benefit corporations basically provide a mission, right? But if that mission is not sustainable, they can't exist. The not-profit kind of stigma needs to be taken away from what we're doing. We want to do something that's mission-driven and sustainable at the same time. So I just wanted to talk about that. Can you go on to the next one? Go on to the next one. I'm not going to talk about this. I want to give you two things that I think are extremely important in the RAD process. One is, during the 1996 with Atlanta Public Housing Authority, Atlanta could go around and brag about all the new development they did. But what took place? Social displacement. All right?
That's right, yes.
What took place in Chicago? I'm from Chicago. I've seen 40 blocks torn down. And so when we're talking about the gangbanging and all that's taking place, what took place? Social displacement, lack of economic opportunity, what's that going to lead to? So if me and Mr. Baker are once, rivals and stuff where we had geographical boundaries, now I'm coming out the house and I'm saying, dude, I'm fighting food. I'm shooting coming out the house on him. You know what I'm saying? So all of that created this kind of problem. So what HUD basically said was, there's going to be two conditions in terms of converting to RAD. One, the housing authority has to be part of the ownership. Some of these developers will go around and say, no, they only have to be a part of it with the ground lease. Way we structure it, you're part of the ownership and you're part of the development team. The second thing is, every tenant has the right to return. That's crucial. I'm going to say this again. Every tenant has the right to return. So as soon as you put in your RAD Chapel Ward, you have to make a tenant list and keep that tenant list updated. Now, I'm going to say this too, and I'll say this to the residents. You have the right to return as long as you follow the lease. And that's where lease and all that kind of stuff comes in, to make sure you have a fair lease, but at the same time to keep people accountable, because what you want to do is create an environment where people can live and try to enhance their quality of life, or instead of being fearful. Everywhere I go, it's the same thing. I heard the police report, so I know people are under fear here. You know what I'm saying? So those are the two things that I think are the most important thing that I thought about RAD, okay? Yeah.
Now, when you talk about every tenant has the right to return, we know there's going to be some tenants that don't want to go into it. So is it still our responsibility to find them a place?
No, let me just, so every tenant has the right to return. So you have your tenant, your rental rent rolls. Yeah. All right, so you've got every tenant in there. If a tenant comes to you and say that, hey, I'm leaving, you have to have them sign off that they're leaving. So that's one thing. If you evict somebody, you have to make sure you have a file that documents that eviction. HUD is going to ask, or they could ask, they don't because there's so much going on, but they could ask to say, here's the tenant roll that you had at the time that you submitted your tax rate award. You have to have an accountability for every tenant that has left. And we know that that's hard sometimes, because some people leave in the middle of the night and just just leave. So then that would have to be explained, okay? But every tenant has the right to return, and you don't have any obligations if you evict somebody or somebody moves out on their own. Okay? I'm not gonna go through this too much, but it's the strengths, I did this early on with the strengths and weaknesses. I did a SWOT analysis of the RAD program. And the main thing is, I want y'all to see some of the stuff that I just got through talking about. Less HUD requirements, more capital, housing authority as a part of the ownership, the resident's right to return. Housing authority will participate in developer fees. I'm gonna talk about that. In the past, housing authorities would have relationships with developers where the split would be 80 to 20. Because the affordable housing developer was saying, I'm bringing all this expertise to the deal. Housing authority has all the land, resources, and things like this. And it was an imbalance. What RAD has done is kind of balance this out, where housing authorities now, basically because of my friend Stuart Goodman, I think he has also made a presentation to you all, he basically advocated for housing authorities to get more developer fee. So when you get developer fee, then there's a whole cash management system that you have to figure out of how to use it for more affordable housing, how do you use it for staff capacity for building, and then for residential self-sufficiency programs. None of that. The weaknesses, you have to have a part. You have to staff and training and downside realigning. And I've got some suggestions there. A relocation plan. The way we do relocation plans is very, very simple. If you have a housing authority that has 175 units, depending on what you're doing, if you're tearing it down, you tear it down in stages, and then you build. We ask the housing authority to cut off the waiting list, so as you have an attrition, then all of a sudden you have units available for relocation, and you literally just play musical chairs until the development is done. That works for a rehab or a new construction, okay? The hardest thing is if you have towers. The beautiful thing that I work in rural areas, we don't have towers. We basically just have duplexes and flats. So it's very, very easy, or detached housing, so it's very, very easy to do a relocation plan. The biggest challenge for housing authorities in terms of the affordable housing side of things and working with tax credits is the tax credit operating deficit guarantees and all the guarantees associated with this. So the developer brings that to the table. They put up the guarantees on all of those kind of deals. Yes, ma'am.
So a question about the strengths and sort of thinking, and I want to check my thinking on it. With the housing authority being the owner as opposed to the developer, it feels like a developer can say something will be affordable this year and next year can decide to increase that rent based on other affordability.
Two things that hold that. Yes, please. Two things that hold that back. One, project-based rental assistance. 100% of the units, if they are project-based. Some people like to do mixed income and things like that, so that would take that. But also, if you're applying for tax credits, there's certain kind of requirements that you have to follow with the tax credits. Raising the rents is not an option, but the beautiful thing about, in terms of revenue generation with project-based rental assistance, which other developments don't get, is they get an OPAP adjustment every year. This year it was 3% as opposed to 2%. So if you multiply that 15 years out, you're getting a strong cash flow return. Okay? So in affordable housing that's using tax credits, the risk of changing can't happen because it needs to be affordable for 15 to 20 years. So there's movements now because the market is so great that 15 years, I've been in the business long enough to see some of my deals be 15 years old, so the developer at that time can flip that to a market rate development, but DCA now has put in kind of like competitive point scoring to keep affordable housing in there. So you don't have that risk if you convert to RAD using tax credits.
And do we have the risk, I guess I'm trying to understand, we don't have that risk converting to RAD.
Right.
Do we have that risk if we continue the model of selling land to developers and them developing?
You'll never sell the land. Let me just say this. The units that you have right now, you might have some vacant land that you might want to sell. Okay? And you might want to do a joint venture with the developer. You might want to do a joint venture and use 9% or 4% credits, okay? That's going to stipulate that there's still no chance of raising the rents, okay? But what I would suggest is that you don't ever sell your land. You do a ground lease, And the ground lease can be over 75 years or minimum, up to 100 years, but that's one way of you retaining the rights to the land. So that when this comes up, 15 years from now, you get a chance to syndicate the deal. Syndicate meaning that you can rehab the deal more with more equity coming to it, and you would still own the property. And hopefully by that time, you would have qualified to fully own it as opposed to having a developer. And most people might say, well, why are you just doing this in terms of literally coming in, doing all the work, and then stepping out? Because I hope that if I do a good job, Mr. Baker, Mr. Kitts, and the board would say, I recommend you to another housing authority. Because hopefully you all will become developers 2 to 3 years out. There's 1.2 million public housing units. I'm old, and so there's a finite amount of time that I have on this earth. And so what I'm saying is that hopefully word of mouth can spread. That's how I think Mr. Kitts and Ms. Bailey even, found out about me in terms of that conference.
Yes, sir. So Whispering Oaks was a tax credit deal that the housing authority participating now owns that.
Okay. And does this have the opportunity to convert to single-family home housing?
It's very hard under the Low Income Housing Act tax credit business right now. When I started, that's all we did, 40, 60 units of single family home in rural areas. We thought that was a beautiful program because you could do rent, then it had a tenant ownership at the end of it and stuff. But because of the cost of doing single family homes as opposed to multifamily, DCA moved away from that.
Okay.
So just to give you an example, the cost of doing 40 units is the same cost of doing 90 in multifamily. So DCA said we've got limited resources, so we don't want to run a lot of single family homes. But let me just tell you this. Housing authorities, what y'all have is land. So, and it's land that's not used properly. I think that's the word. So for example, up in Canton, I'm dealing with a development that's 22 acres. It's 75 units. I can build 300 units on 22 acres. What we're going to do is build 125. We're going to bifurcate the property, and then we're going to have 20 single-family homes that the housing authority ends up building. So there's all kind of creative ways. One of the things that I like about RAD is it's clean sheet of paper. You can be as flexible as you want. We're talking about now turning housing authorities into campuses. Campuses of health and wellness, as opposed to just projects and developments. So that all of a sudden that your development all of a sudden plugs in everything that you need. I'm looking across the street and I see these people playing tennis and stuff. That should be plugged into the housing authority. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's just a part of it. But you don't have the risk, and that's why I say you really need a tax credit attorney that understands this. And you all have been introduced to one of the best.
So you're saying that inside this RAG, we can build a whole community with amenities that the residents can access, from adults to children.
That's right.
Playgrounds, tennis courts,
One of the things I want y'all to do is take a trip up to LaGrange.
Okay.
And Ms. Herr to open up her door to you all. But I want you also to see the staff. When she makes a presentation, they're dressed to the T. They are like, and she doesn't do anything. The whole staff just makes the presentation to housing authorities when they come up. They go through a tour. We've done 4 deals. We just closed one last week, and that was a rehab deal. We've done 2 new constructions up there. She's got 90 units left out of 420. So she's going to be out the business. So now what she's going to be doing is partnering with other housing authorities to do work. So that's one of the things that I recommend, that the staff and the housing authority take a trip to LaGrange sometime, just to hear their story. Opportunities and threats, a lot of this has gone away. Opportunities, new construction, more capital. Here's the other thing. With the RAD, because you can bring money, I've been trying to organize in communities since I was 19 years old. But when you're organizing at 19 and you don't have any money, who listens to you? All of a sudden now I can bring $25 to $30 million for every 100-unit deal. So now all of a sudden, people are listening to me, community stakeholders are listening to me. So now it's easier to bring community stakeholders on. And one of the things that I say is, it's the time to do the rebranding. But what I'm hearing right now already, you all are talking about the rebranding. You're talking about the internal infrastructure, getting straight. And just like with your body, and just like with anything of substance, you got to build up from the ground. The foundation has to be good. Internal has to be good. Then you can blossom. You can't try to blossom outside with all of this not right. Okay, so that's the way I do the analogy between the body and housing authorities. We talked about that. Let's go on and flip one more. Getting started. I just sent this all to Mr. Kidd, so you all can have this, but it basically just talks about the organizational chart. You can see the housing authority is co-general partner and co-developer. Okay, on all of these deals. Why is that important? Because you want to be able to check the box, because 3-4 years down the line, if you got 3 or 4 deals, now you can apply for credit yourself to DCA without a developer being involved. Northwest Georgia Housing Authority has just reached that limit. Now, they're a developer on their own right now. Okay? Can you put the
Question, before you go there.
Yep.
Go. Mr. You mind going back? Why can't we get that second tier? I have our own asset. We are investors, we're maybe investors.
You can't be here.
Why?
Here's where you get all your money from.
Well, we get all our money from Canada. I don't mean to interrupt your conversation, because I think the development partner, we need to be here. We got the land.
You are there.
We're under here.
No.
So this is our entity?
Yeah, that's your entity.
So this is us here?
That's right. Co-GP and
I just want to make sure we are on the line on that.
No.
I need to make sure.
Right here, this is the most fairest organizational structure you'll see in affordable housing.
I mean, because I have to be careful when people leave labels up there. Code General don't specifically say our entity. I need to make sure that we
Right. We suggest that you set up an entity because you're going to become a developer.
Right.
So
I agree.
You create this housing authority entity right here.
Right. So, but the Code General is what?
Co-general partner.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the way. So you see this managing partner?
Mm-hmm.
That's the developer. Why?
I know. Yeah. He got the expertise. He got.
Now, the biggest reason is because he's putting up all the guarantees to that investor. So that this developer's balance sheet is on the line.
Hold on.
Can you define those terms?
Yes.
Hold on. Development partner. But he's required to put up all in this process.
Yes.
Okay.
When you're using tax credits, 9 times out of 10, the housing authority doesn't have the ability to put up the guarantees because you need unrestricted cash.
Okay. Now, who owns the utilities? Can we own those utilities, or we're going to co-own those utilities and rent that out to the cable companies?
Okay, you're jumping into something else. There's all kind of revenue streams that can take place, not from this, but from the development itself.
Okay, I got you.
You all were talking about broadband, right? I just made a presentation to a national organization. It was about 1.5 years ago. And what I found out is that $65 billion, they don't have a way to get into the streets.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And so what I tried to tell them is that you got to understand RAD. If you understand RAD, and when you convert it to RAD, now all of a sudden the broadband has a way to get into rural communities through the infrastructure and through the buildings. Right. When you start building new construction or rehab. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest problem that HUD has. That money's been out there for a while.
Yes.
They don't know how to get into the streets. And so RAD can get into the streets, but I want you all to think about that when you heard that other presentation, because that's what you all need to promote within that box. Can we flip one more? Okay, so the transformative plan internally, all right? So what you all are talking about now is really getting your internal structure. But now I'm going to add another dimension to it, and that's why I think it's so important to get this together, because if you all don't get this together, the investors gonna vet me out. They gonna kick tires. They gonna review me. But guess who else they gonna review? The housing authority. Sure. They gonna know what your REACT score is. They gonna know what your balance sheet looks like. They gonna want to know how your internal controls are. How are you running your operations? And if you're not running it well, they'll back away. So they're gonna review me and you. So it's extremely important to move this. So what we basically said is you got the executive director, and this can vary, but this was just thrown together just to give you an idea. So the deputy director becomes director of development. The facilities director becomes construction project manager, involved in the construction so that they can learn that process. The director of housing becomes a tax credit property manager. This is the most important thing. So everyone on your staff that's a property manager needs to go through the tax credit certification process. That can begin now. Okay? Once you get, most of y'all, have you ever heard of a book called Good to Great?
Yes.
Get the right people on the bus, then figure out where they need to be. Once you figure that out, then Director of Residential Services starts doing marketing and fundraising for the organization to make sure that you can do your self-sufficiency program. Accounting and administrative, tax credit drawing, that's a extremely complicated thing. But that deals with, after the deal is closed and construction starts, how do you handle that from an accounting standpoint? Yes, ma'am.
So, in respect to Whispering Oaks, because that is the tax credit property that we own, we are in our second 15-year phase out through DCA so that we can own it and manage it. But there's also, I'm sorry, I should be looking at you, but I'm thinking.
That's all right. That's all right.
But there's actually trainings and certifications that staff would need, but they would have to hold that certification anywhere from a year to 2 before. So, would there be time to do?
Here's the thing. You got to look at this as a campaign. So you got to start somewhere.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So if it takes 2 to 3 years to get it, it takes 2 to 3 years. But you got 500 units to play with so that you can get the staff up together. So let me just say this about Whispering Springs. I would suggest that y'all look at going after 4% tax credits sooner or later, because it's in the re-syndication process. Now, it can be re-syndicated now. You know what I'm saying? So that's an immediate, low-hanging fruit, what I would consider right there. Now, it won't be rad, but you could transfer units. There's a process where you can take some public housing units and transfer those units to Whispering Oaks. Is it project-based rental assistance now?
Yes, they're project-based.
Okay, so the whole thing is you got to figure out what's the length of that contract, how is it expiring or something like this. But the point that I like about working with housing authorities, you got so many tools that you can be so creative with.
So even if there was certain parts of Whispering Oaks, and you said those could be converted over into.
Well, not Whispering Oaks, but you can say you had 20 residents that you wanted to transfer assistance, so the RAD units would then be transferred over to Whispering Oaks.
Like the public housing.
Well,
and that would, does that incorporate also our locally owned units, like Section 8 and then the vouchers?
It would be the Section 8 units.
Okay.
That's the public housing units would be transferred over. And so what would come with that is the rent support to Whispering Oaks. But you would be literally transferring some units over there. Let's just say you had a occupancy problem at Whispering Oaks. That would be the ideal situation where you would just transfer 20 units, if you had 20 units down, over to Whispering Oaks. Hey, check this out. Brainstorming about this, I'm telling you, it's unlimited.
My hamsters.
Brainstorming about this, I'm telling you, it's unlimited because you have a blank sheet of paper. And that Miss Hudson deal, when I bifurcated the property in half, that's been my go-to now. Because I can't get funded 182 units under the program. So I have to bifurcate properties. And now I got 2 deals instead of 1.
So, sorry, one more thing.
Yeah.
So our locally owned units, these are units that the housing authority owns that are offered at a flat rent basis, and there's different leasing terms. But there's also individuals that qualify and get issued like a Section 8 voucher, but they can also be utilized in those locally owned units. Would that still qualify, like those to be moved over to the Whispering Oaks for
No.
Okay.
Under the tax credit program, there's the way the tax credit program works, that as long as you're below 60% area median income, then you get a chance to get equity based on those units. So let's say you had 100 units and 10 of those units were over income or flat rent. They were over the 60%. That means that I'm going to get 90% of the equity from that limited investor as opposed to 100%.
So even as the FMR fluctuates, does that play into it?
Area median incomes will fluctuate, but as long as it's up over 60%, if it's over 60%, we call that over income units that we can't get tax credit equity benefit on.
Sure, because it's only based off of 30 or 40% of their gross income anyway.
That's right.
Got it.
That's right. But the main thing, so here's what I say to housing authorities all the time. This is really complicated. And I just want to say that it's not something that you can digest in a 15, 20-minute presentation. And that's why I would love to come back over and over again to talk to you about the low. I'm talking to you all about RAD now, but I want to talk to you about low-income housing tax credits, which is a lot more complicated. So that's why we advocate with housing authorities, because it's been my experience that 5 to 10% of housing authority units, depending on the availability of affordable housing in a particular community, have over-income residents. So what we do is we start identifying those residents right there to start going into single-family homes. LaGrange Housing Authority had bought a piece of property $110,000 during the foreclosure period. And so now they built 2 model houses, and now they're going to transfer 20 of those RAD public housing over to this. And at the same time, anybody that's over income, they're going to build a house for. You wrap around the services in terms of down payment assistance, how to take care of a house and all of that kind of stuff around it.
Sorry.
No.
So home ownership could essentially work into this also through like the FSS, like self-sufficiency and stuff like that. I mean, if we're talking about like down payment assistance and
That's
all
right.
that stuff.
That's right. But
Okay.
home ownership, remember, your over income tenants, housing authority should be used for what it was, to stabilize folks like in emergency medicine, and then they're built up so that they can move out.
Sure. And then, obviously, one of our main purposes is to, bring a family in and work them towards self-sufficiency, so that's where it all kind of incorporates. And then also that would allow us to move and develop and get families out of poverty-stricken areas, which would allow more opportunities for work, learning, stuff like that.
And it allows for more people that need the assistance.
Sure.
To need that stabilization process. So I'm just telling you all, with this, it's unlimited. So when I go to housing authorities, I don't ask for your needs. And you might hear this a lot, I ask for your wish. If I can't get it, I'll explain why we can't get it, because the funding is not there. But we should not start off with needs. And most developers 5, 6 years ago were starting off with needs. If I could just do a deal for $25,000 a unit, I'm happy. We're trying to push the envelope. I'm closer to the deal because of construction costs and everything. In Camilla, Georgia, $130,000 a unit on a rehab development. Go ahead.
The last one I promise.
No, please. It's on you all in terms of time.
I promise. Well, I know that's my last one, I promise. So we are currently working on the Ross grant, which is resident opportunity for self-sufficiency. But then you have also with the RAD that allows all these other programs. Is there any concern for a conflict of interest if the Ross grant offers the same that the RAD could offer, or did they work in conjunction with because you're also getting, you're getting grants for this and that, and you don't want to get. I'm sorry.
That's right. It could work in conjunction.
So there's no risk of double dipping or.
That's
so
right.
to speak.
That's
Okay.
right. And here's the other thing. I want you all to understand this. We've created a network of housing authorities. These are people that trust me. I trust them. I was telling Mr. Kitts, to be transparent, I got fired from a company because of the structures that I'm building with housing authorities. Every housing authority that I had an MOU agreement with, had a relationship with, closing on 2 of them during this process. They basically said, no, if Paul's not involved in it, we're not doing it. The bank even said the same thing. So this is about trust and transparency and education and information. Okay, so that's the way our company works through this process. And like most of the presenters that you've seen today, I can tell they're committed to the community and for the people. And that's what our company, is about. So if we can, I want to show you all. I'm kind of proud of it, but it doesn't make sense to tell you the truth. But here's the director of development, and what we've done is list all the things that a director of development needs to start dealing with. You need to understand if you got vacant land, current housing program, needs and desire analysis, 1 or 2 tax credit seminars. You need to start attending state agencies, DCA's things. I'm part of the Georgia Affordable Housing Coalition. You need to start coming to our meetings to learn more information. And I would say everybody, to tell you the truth. And it's gonna cost you a little money. Miss Heard, she got criticized so much. She would bring 20 people to all these meetings. And she got criticized every time she would do that. But now it's paying dividends because through osmosis and through constantly hearing this, all of her staff understands this at a really, really high level. Advocacy. Housing authorities need to begin to start advocating more about resources. GARA does well, but I think they can be more effective. But they don't understand how to use tax credits. So how are you going to be effective if you don't understand how to use tax credits? So anyway, those are some of the things that I think the Director of Development can flip to the next one. Thank you.
And that's just real quick, that would, you said that's the, like, Director of Housing will be the Director of Development on the other.
That's right.
Okay.
Director of Development, Construction Project Manager.
Do I have that email?
Which email?
I want this presentation.
Not yet.
It's mine.
So, so here's all the things that I've learned that the project construction. So your facilities manager needs to start going through this to get accustomed to the terms and all the regulations that's under low-income housing tax credits. Let's go to the next one. Thank you. Tax credit property management. We talked about that a little bit already. Over income and tenants. We talked about current unit mix and compared to demand. Some housing authorities will have a waiting list, like families are getting smaller. So some housing authorities will have a waiting list. Why would you continue to have 3 and 5 bedrooms? So when we did Ms. Hudson's deal, she took all the 5 bedrooms, converted them to 4s, some 4s to 3s and 2s and stuff like this. The 4 bedroom units are huge because we gutted everything out, but we had the space of a 5 bedroom unit. Absolutely gorgeous, you know what I'm saying? The rights of tenant to return, we talked about the relocation plan. That's all the tax credit property manager needs to have those kind of responsibilities. If we can connect to the next one. Residential services, I think I heard KB, you know, the organization that y'all just had talking about connecting the dots with grants and stuff like this. Well, whoever's ahead of the property management needs to be, how do we fundraise? How do we tell our narrative? You all are going to be able to tell a narrative pretty soon, you know, through this kind of rebranding effort. Once you begin that narrative, and I heard the other organization talk about helping with the narrative, you build out a beautiful narrative. I sent Mr. Kiss the Community Transformation Plan. I did it, and I'm not a writer at all. It literally killed me to try to do this. I stayed up 3 nights in a row trying to put this thing together. But the Community Transformation Plan ended up getting funded. But it really talks about what the Grange went through in terms of now they've got a narrative that they're getting so much more money now. Because they can tell their story and they can pull it off the shelf. Okay, grants coming out, boom, here we go. You know, let's go to the next one. Plan for relocation, let's go. We talked about this a little bit, and I don't want to get into detail here, but the main thing I want you to hear is this is the attrition plan strategy. Cut off the waiting list. As units come available, keep them available so that you can play the musical chairs. Okay, let's go to the next one. Rad in real life. Willingham Village, that's the development I was talking about with Northwest Georgia Housing Authority. You can see where we got $4.2 million. Northwest Georgia Housing Authority only contributed $290,000 to $85,000 a unit in construction on 96 units. Some other stuff in terms of, you know, like most appraisers don't know how to appraise these rad deals, but now they're getting better. And initially we found a $1 million undervalue on that. If your appraisal's undervalued, that means you can do less construction. Okay, so that's just a thing. Let's go to the next one. This is LaGrange. This was the first phase. LaGrange ended up entering an agreement with Kresge Foundation. They got $2.5 million. Got LaGrange in this deal contributed to $1.2 million. And the beautiful thing about that, the housing authority will get that out of cash flow back to them. All right, let's go to the next one. This is, remember I told you about bifurcating the property? This was 182 units. This was Lucy Morgan 1, which is the first deal. This deal just closed last week, which is 93 units. So, and again, we're spending, just to give you an example on this, how construction costs. This is $82,000, this is $120,000 of rehab. You might say, why didn't you build new construction? One of the things you gotta manage expectations. There was a consultant that went into LaGrange and said, no. LaGrange said, we want all new housing. So the consultant said to the newspaper, we're gonna build all new housing. Residents got excited, but that was not practical. You can't build all new housing on 420 units and depend on 9% or 4% credits. It was not possible at that time. So we had to come back and tell them, hey, this development right here is off the beaten path. So we'll do act rehab on this one, okay? And then go to the next one. Yep, go to the next one. So found out LaGrange had vacant land right next to this property. So we basically said, hey, this road right here, Whitesville Road, is a major thoroughfare from I-85 to downtown LaGrange. So when we saw that, we basically said, man, we need to turn this into a linear park. And we need to build 70 housings over here for the elderly. So we ended up doing that, turning this into a linear park, and we got $300,000 from the city and $300,000 from the Callaway Foundation. They wouldn't have given us this money if it wasn't on this road. You see what I'm saying? So what you begin to do is you begin to leverage your assets where they are. Here's what we do know. When public housing was built, it was built in what? Floodways, wetlands, low-lying area, next to railroad tracks, some of the most wasteful land in that city at that particular time. But what has happened? Cities have grown. Now what's happening? Those units, that property is the most valuable property in the city. Okay? So now you begin to leverage. And guess what? You can't move these residents. You'll get sued fair housing. The city will lose everything if they move these residents to a place that's not close to the amenities that there are right now. Fair housing will eat them up. So what we do is we go to cities and basically say, hey, you got this property here, you can't move, you might as well join us and try to redevelop this property in such a way that it transforms the whole community. And I heard somebody say economic engine, it becomes an economic engine for the city. So now there's a better partnership. Housing authorities and cities, in my experience, most of the time they never talk to each other. You know what I'm saying? But because of RAD now we can have these conversations about how to redevelop the properties together. In the city of Canton, unheard of. Last year we got $2.8 million from the city of Canton. And what we ended up doing is we structured it as a loan that's going to pay them back early. So it's a win-win for the city, it's a win-win for the city of Canton. That was unheard of. And here's the thing, in the DCA competitive process, you get points if you get leverage enough dollars, right? So they basically said, if you give $30,000, you'll get 3 points. The city of Canton said, so it was a 70-unit development, so that's 2.1 million. The city of Canton says, can we get 4 points if we get 2.8? I said, no, they capped it at at 3 points. They said, okay, so what? We'll give you $2.8 million. Jesus. It was unheard of, you know? Can you click one more? I think that's it. So, let me tell you, this PowerPoint was done in 2018. This is done now. So if you go to LaGrange, you'll see a beautiful linear park. It makes me cry every time. I walk there just crying because to see something come like this that literally jump-started the streetscaping on Whitesville Road, and I knew down here was the Great Wolf Recreations. I read it in the paper. I said, oh, they building a center down there, and they expect 500,000 people to come through this area. We need to help the city out, and that's why they gave us $300,000, and Callaway Foundation gave us $300,000. Callaway Foundation focuses on green space. So these are the kind of things you figure out with your city. Where can they plug in? Where does the synergy exist? This phase is done. It doesn't look like this, and there's one less phase left to do. But the LaGrange Housing Authority right now wants to be a little bit flexible and doesn't want to convert those to RAD because they're still getting capital funds on that. So they want to stay in the capital PUD program for a little while. Can you click one more? I think that's it. Okay, can you do me a favor and go to one other thing? And I'm not going to go through this. Go to the graphic illustration. So I gave a 12-week course to about 12 housing authorities on low-income housing tax credits. It was very, very draining because there's so much to this. But what took place was, I hired a graphic illustrator. I don't know if you've ever seen those people that can literally draw while you're talking. And so this young lady did this, and it literally talks about the whole understanding of how tax credits work. So I wanted to leave this with you all, and we can come back and discuss this anytime, you know. But I just want you to know it's extremely complicated. The 9% round is competitive. So what that means is that you've got 100 applications that will go in and only 30 deals will get funded. And it's like a test. We just came over, June 3rd was when we submitted our applications. We got to wait till all the way to December to determine whether or not we get funded. Okay? The 4% round is less competitive, but it's still, DCA just made it competitive. So that's another thing you have to do. And the problem that housing authorities have, as opposed to other developers look for land that really fits the competitive process. Housing authority land is where it is. So you can't benefit from kind of like figuring out where you want to score. So anyway, and that's a whole nother process. And what I'd like to do is like to send you all information in terms of how to get prepared for this. But I just want to say again, I think what you all are doing is on the right path internally, get everything together, and then talk about development. And I know you might want to think you can parallel do this, and I think you can in many cases, but there's a lot of stuff that you can prep for so that once you're ready, you can run with it. Okay? And that's the beautiful thing about housing authorities. You know where the property is, you know what the issues are. We all know where the wetlands are, we know where the flood maps and where the units are. We'll know which ones the city might want to say, okay, I'll give you money on this one, but not on this one. You know what I'm saying? So you begin to start having these conversations early in the process. Yes, ma'am. One more.
One more, I promise.
That's the way I used to do about drinking. One more. I forgot this is recorded.
Be on YouTube this afternoon.
Okay.
So right now we don't operate like a site-based waiting list or preference-based waiting list or anything like that. We just have like mixed families as far housing communities, single homes, ADA, multifamily, stuff like that. They're all just kind of mixed in. So would there be any issues, say if we wanted to just focus on just like an elderly housing community or a multifamily housing community, or can you do that? Or
let me tell you, to be honest with you, I got in trouble. I asked for forgiveness as opposed to permission on the deal, and that was with LaGrange. I just thought it was a great idea to segregate the populations, because then you can kind of address and intensify the social services for a particular market. So I said, why don't we do elderly on that vacant land, even though the development that it came from was multifamily. HUD gave me a little pushback on that. We got over it, so what we had to do was a preference for elderly. Do you already have elderly sites?
No.
Designated elderly?
Yes. No,
okay.
Not so.
It makes it a little difficult, but you know what? Here's what I found out about RAD. RAD is constantly evolving. All right, let me give you an example. So if you're a housing authority that's in an opportunity zone, you get $100 extra on every one of your rental units. That's huge.
Say that again.
If a housing authority is in an opportunity zone, you get $100 extra on every one of your units. So that helps. The more rent money you have, the more you can do with construction. Okay, so just keep those things in relation.
In opportunity zone, does that mean like locality? Like
Here's what happens.
Like hospitals?
The governor and...
Yeah, we applied, Brunswick applied to be an opportunity zone, and so
certain areas.
They've been, what's on the map, it's not the whole city, but yeah.
I can give you the information that you can determine where you are. All your units probably are in opportunity zones because it literally follows the QCTs. Not all of them, majority of them, but yeah. It usually follows the QCTs. And that's the way they kind of build out. They just said, okay, we're going to use the QCT and send it to the governor for approval. There's other things that the RAD has done. They have what's called Section 18 RAD blend. Your housing authority wouldn't qualify for that right now, but once you get to 250 units or less, then 80% of your units can be at fair market rents in the conversion. That's huge. And up in Canton, the rents are $1,400 for a 3-bedroom on fair market rents. So now, guess what? I'm getting project-based rental assistance on that unit for $1,400. So the point that I'm making is HUD basically put everything out, promoted it, then all of a sudden got a chance to reevaluate it and say, hey, we need to come up with some different tweaks. And now, to tell you the truth, sometimes I think they get a little bureaucratic because they got all this feedback, so they know what to look out for when they're working with developers. Any questions? I think that's it. You know, I can go on for days with this because I think that this is a movement that can really, really pay dividends. You know, we partner with an organization called Black Art in America, and if you're ever in the East Point, Georgia, I want y'all to go visit that facility. They're working with the East Point Housing Authority right now, and they're doing magnificent work there with community gardens and things like that. Broadband is something that we want to do, and solar panel and solar farms, if that's a possibility in Brunswick.
Let me ask this question. Have you got to depart immediately, Mr. Robinson?
No, not immediately.
Okay. So for now, we'll hold all questions. Commissioner Dickerson, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we have a 15-minute recess.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Board is recessed for 15 minutes. And when we get back, we will immediately come back to this section.
Remember that? Whatever they on now. And it doesn't even matter if you don't even know. You know what I'm saying? Just because of rain.
The RAP presentation. We're going to have some Q&A for him. Unfortunately, he has some other commitments he has to attend to. So we're going to go ahead and continue down the agenda. Moving on to old business, and under old business, we have approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on June 8th, 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes? I will entertain a motion.
I motion that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on June 8th, 2022.
Second.
I have a motion made by Madam Vice Chair Bailey to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on June 8th, 2022. Seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The opposed have the same. That motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have approval of the minutes of the special call meeting held on June 29, 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes?
I motion that we approve the minutes of the special call meeting held on June 29, 2022.
Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of the special call meeting held on June 29, 2022 by Madam Vice Chair Bailey, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. Do we have any further discussion?
I just wanted to point out something that Jamie and I were in that meeting, because that was the budget meeting, right? And this doesn't say present, but I don't care if I just wanted to point it out.
Ms. Cooper?
Sure.
Can you please make changes to include Ms. Dyer and Ms. Howes
Yes,
to the special call meeting minutes held on June 29, 2022? Madam Vice Chair, would you care to amend your agenda
Yes.
to include the changes?
Yes, I motion that we amend the agenda to include,
Minutes.
the minutes to include Ms. and Ms. Cooper,
Ms. Dyer and
Ms. Dyer, and Ms. House.
Do that.
I second.
Got a motion to amend the minutes of the special call meeting held on June 29, 2022 to include as present Ms. Howes and Ms. Dyer. Again by Madam Vice Chair Bailey, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Sorrell?
I wasn't a commissioner at that time, so I didn't know.
You can abstain.
For sure, aye.
You can abstain.
Aye, abstain, but I wasn't present.
Okay, we have 3 in favor, 1 abstaining. That was for the amendment. So now we have to move back to the previous, which was to approve the minutes of the special call meeting held on June 29, 2022. All in favor say, or, no, we already had discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed have the same. That one passes with 3 in favor and 1 abstaining. Next up on the agenda, we have a request to defer the June 2022 financial reports. Ms. Dyer, would you care to give us just a brief explanation?
Yeah, normally we present preliminary financials at the July board meeting for the month of June, and it's always preliminary because we still have June open in the general ledger because a lot of invoices, accounts payable, payroll, a lot of things are still open that are being posted back to June, so it's partially meaningless because it's going to change, number one, and number two, because I don't have a lot of the stuff that I need, and I'm still working on some of the other stuff because of everything that's going on. I am not to the point where I could even generate them, so that's why.
That just sounds like that's a staff problem to me.
Yes, yes.
But
But even in a perfect world, it will change from what today would normally say and what the end of the month would say by the time we're done with the month of June.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to defer, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll second the motion.
I entertain a motion that we defer the June 22 financial report.
Second.
I have a motion by Madam Vice Chair Bailey to defer the June 2022 financial reports, seconded by Commissioner Sorrell. Do we have any further discussion?
I would like to ask a question. Do the financial committee need to be a part of these decisions when it's being deferred or these issues come up?
I don't know. I mean, that would be up to you guys. I mean, this was just something that, came up last week while we were discussing things, and I mean, it doesn't normally happen, I mean, it just doesn't normally happen. Although, once again, what I would normally present in June is something that is going to change anyway, so.
Okay. Because of the new fiscal year.
Because we're still booking, not to be too accounting nerdy, but we're still booking plenty of stuff to June that are June expenses, that, invoices are coming in for stuff that happened in June, stuff we bought in June. That has to get posted back to June. If any of the payroll that we got paid today, if any of that pertains to June days, I have to make an entry to post that back into June. There's a host of things that go on.
Okay. So literally just all the money for June is not in yet.
Right, all the expenses are not recorded, yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same?
I said aye.
My apologies. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to executive director's items. And I believe this is to include the contracts that we've looked at today. And we're gonna, is there any other executive director's items other than the various contracts you provided to us today, Mr.
There are, yes. There's a, before I get to the contract, I'm gonna ask Mr. Cooper to come up, present just 5-10 minutes, talk about.
This will be another contract?
No, this is not the contract, but it's the executive director's issue right now.
I mean, is this going to entail another, I know we've got two.
No, this not gonna, but I need for y'all to understand that we didn't get a chance. I need for you need to understand something that's gonna lead to a whole nother division, where we are security. We got a safety issue here.
Okay.
And before I get to the contract, where is it? Ms. Cooper, we living in we got a community that, wow. If my daughters, well, let me put it like, we need to address some security issues. Mr. Cooper was very gracious in helping us with this report, then I get to the contract. Ms. Cooper.
So, Mr. Cooper, hang on 1 second. I know I'm familiar with you, and some of us may be familiar with, but can you introduce yourself and give us a bit of a background as well?
Yes.
So we can all become a little more familiar with you.
So my name is Ronnie Cooper. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Give you a quick background on myself. I've been in law enforcement and police officer for, excuse me, coming up on 18 years. I've worn all the hats. I've been in investigation, narcotic investigation, training division. I've done a little bit of everything. Spent the last 7 years working with the FBI. Also attached to the U.S. Marshal Violent Offenders Task Force. I worked with the DEA, organized crimes. I am certified through Florida and Georgia as an expert in gang activity. I'm a gang investigator. I worked months and months of ongoing criminal activity based on gang situations. And a lot of those investigations did not get spoke about by Ms. Wright because she don't know. She's not privy to the information. We worked 48-month investigation in the city of Brunswick that has identified over 100 gang members in public housing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What?
I'm not,
So.
In my public housing?
Yes, sir.
In our over 100?
Apologies
There's
for
probably
taking
more than
ownership. I apologize.
No, she's working on
Say that again.
things.
Probably more than that.
But right now it's over 100.
In my personal opinion, but verified gang members on public housing property, I would say over 100.
Are they residents or non-residents, or are they staying with people that live in public
A
housing?
mixture of the three. So what's happened, and I spoke briefly on this yesterday, the state of Florida, my understanding, has implemented a new resident intake drug testing requirement. And when that happened, Miami-Dade took a blunt of it, and it pushed most of the people out of public housing, and they landed here. So your biggest problem here is a 305 blood gang, and it's flooded in here. Really, really bad. It is kind of beyond imagination, and I currently work with Lake County Police Department, and I completely disagree with my chief on our problem in this county of being speeding. Our problem is violent crimes, and a lot of them happen right here. This police report, all this is 107 pages of the cost for service in just the public housing community. Just your guys' unit. It's a total of 3,944 calls so far to date. That's just times that the police. That's just times that the police respond to public housing. So
What was the start date on? You said it's
this year to date, from January 1 to current, is 1,248. Total from January 1 of 2021 to current date is 3,944.
Those are calls?
Yes, ma'am.
Calls. Do you have like disaggregated data in terms of what are those calls regarding? Like, is it suspicion, drug activity?
There's a lot of neighborhood patrols and different things with sobriety, from foot patrols to domestic situations to drug problems to assaults to shots fired to homicide. It's all in there.
Are these gang members more in one community than the other, or they spread across all 6 of our communities?
If, this is just my personal opinion based on my investigations in the past, the biggest problem you have is Linville. And I would second would be McIntyre Court. But the heart of the problem is Linville.
And that shows even on this report. McIntyre Glenville has the most.
And the problem is, from the outside looking in at what goes on, is there's a bunch of residents here that are young females. And these guys come in and see a pretty young lady, and for lack of a better term, get involved with her, and then push her out and move their boys in, and it becomes a trap house. There's a bunch of them on property.
They move so wait a minute, they move the resident out?
They'll just push them out.
So wouldn't the site manager know that this is happening?
You would hope so, but that's not
Yeah.
not my cup of tea.
Let's,
Okay.
just from a security point of view though, which is, it seems like that's more of an administrative question, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair.
Administration, well, I asked that question because when you were not here, we were told by some site managers when we had a meeting that they don't know all the residents in their individual community. And so we talked about what to do going forward when they sign up to move into a unit, that they have to sign off, seeing the site, being the site manager, maintenance and inspector, meeting new tenants moving in, so they will know who is in their community.
Right, but this is more of a security.
Yeah.
That sounds a little more administrative.
But that's why I asked, because
No,
it's
great
crazy, it's crazy that when he said that these members are actually moving people out of their units and they're taking over the units. Yes.
It's more of a, again, it's my opinion, it's an intimidation.
Yeah.
It's certainly an intimidation issue.
Yeah.
So I've been asked by Mr. Baker, I just met Mr. Baker on Friday, asked to kind of start looking into the security of the public housing communities and seeing what we can do to increase police activity, decrease the crime a little bit. And I've been in contact with the city of Brunswick, with the school, resource police, with private investigators, security companies. I made contact with the Island Company yesterday. I've been in contact with multiple agencies that do camera systems. I sat down with Bradley. We went over every single camera review for every single property Monday or Tuesday. And I've personally walked, I've spent about 30 hours here since Saturday walking properties and looking. I'd say 40% of the cameras here are garbage. I wouldn't have them. It's a waste of money. They're focused on trees, focused on the back of a building, focused at the sky, straight down at the ground. They're doing no good. And the ones that have a good view is looking across the road. They need to be, one, fixed or torn out and replaced because they're not adjustable, they're not movable. Can't zoom in or focus. They're bad.
So were those the way the cameras were installed, or do you think are they low level where someone can actually move them?
They're all high
up.
They're stationary on single poles, not like you can access them. You can hit it with a basketball or something.
Okay.
But they all look like they were placed where they're at. So, and they're terrible. So that's one issue is cameras. The next issue is the presence, a police presence, a uniform presence. Y'all have 4 slots available for Kpk.
Yes, sir.
We've only got Officer Wright because the city is very, very minimal staffing right now. So
That's with most police departments across the country.
Sir?
That's with most police departments across the country.
That's right, that's correct. We live in that time right now when it's hard to be a police officer. So I've been in contact with Chief Jones and let him know kind of what I'm doing over here, that I was going to be trying to help out, where I could, where where his units are, and he's offered some police presence. So I'm a sworn deputy in 16 counties in the state of Georgia, and I've got plenty of contacts. So I'm going to work out some training, some in-house training where I can get these units, these separate police departments to come here on property and do training, just to put uniforms in the area. K-9 training, SWAT training, whatever, just put uniforms in the area. I'm trying to implement a bike patrol, just to have, so that voluntary compliance, I'm sorry, is what you're looking for. Ain't gotta go out and arrest everybody. And you're looking to help somebody more than you lock them up. But the people that are in here that are causing most of the problem aren't residents here. They're just not, and they're not afraid to be here because they don't have any enforcement. So I'm gonna try to create that enforcement.
What do you mean by additional training? You mentioned, you said K-9 training, you're gonna try to do that on the property?
Yes.
If we can work it out, like vacant buildings we could set up the K-9 training where they come out and do a show and tell. I've been on the SWAT team for 14 years, 15 years, and we do what we call a show and tell. We'll go to different properties. We go to problem areas down in Arco. We've done it in Arco. We've done it in Dixville. We go to the mall, Walmart, Beverly Shores, set up in a vacant lot, spend all day, put all the toys out, let all the kids come and check out everything. It's kind of a walkthrough, educate the children on what we do, show them we're not bad guys, and it puts that presence in the area. So they never know when you're coming, so they kind of shy away from wanting to do bad all the time.
So let me ask you this. Until you do that, what is just some temporary solutions that you can put in place now until we do that training and we get all of that together?
I can make that happen pretty rapidly, but the immediate fix is gonna be the camera system, so it can be more closely monitored, and to go ahead and get some officer presence on property.
So, when you say camera system, okay, all right, so does that include the, security for this front door too here, this main door coming into the central office?
You talking about video security?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, like when someone steps, because we don't have anything out there now, we gotta use our keys and knock on the door, well, I do. But can we have the type that the people on the inside can see who's on the outside, who's up to the door, not coming into?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner Strauss.
I think I'm still trying to understand the scope of the problem. I don't know if any of this data information was shared prior to this conversation.
I've not seen that.
So I think like we all should be mindful of the narrative, cause like this is live and then people hear gang activity and then like the antennas go up, right? So I'm curious about do we have an idea of what percentage of the folks that have been identified as gang involved have resulted in criminal activity? Like I'm just trying to understand the scope of the problem other than just hearing there's over 100 gang members, right? Like what is?
Let me, I understand what you, I understand the question you asked and the sensitivity of it. We're gonna get into a lot of this in the executive session about the restructure. I wanted you all just to hear just a tidbit of what's really going on in your properties, and it has been going on for a long time. And so we're gonna need to create a security division with arrest power, and to create a community policing. Now, with Beats, and go ahead and create some strategic partnerships, and so we already have buy-ins, and so we just got to structure that. And so I understand we don't, is the executive session recorded? Because there's a lot of
No.
Okay, then we need to talk about that in this. So you need to understand that we're just not here creating boxes. Understand that we're here trying to improve and to get us to the next level. And that's part of our score, which is down. And so we got some major issues. And so one thing, I've always taken the position in recorded sessions, they need to know that we know. You need to know that we know. And if you don't stop, we're coming for you. We can't be afraid to lead, and we can't put our managers into in harm's way, as well as our residents. We got to change the dynamic. All this great stuff that we say we can do and we're going to do and all that don't mean anything if we don't gain control of our property, and we don't have control of our property. So we'll talk about that in our executive session. Okay?
Okay. I think this young man is gonna say something.
Really quick, Vice Chairman Bailey, I was the assistant site manager for AMP1, which is Glenville and Alabama for the past 6 months. In my opinion, just based on the situations and dealing with it, the police reports firsthand, the issue as far as we are aware of individuals who are there who aren't supposed to be, and even some of the violence and gang activities. But the issue is our policy, right? As far as our 14-day policy, 14 days is the soonest notice that we can give out, like the shortest notice. You have the 30 day, and you have the 14 day. But there's nothing as far as like violent crimes, as opposed to even if someone, like we have the police report and a violent crime has been committed by a guest of one of our residents or not, 14 days is the minimum amount of time we have to give them. But the issue that we ran into in the 14 days is they get the 14-day letter, and on the 15th day is when we file the warrant. But that could take 2 to 3 weeks for a court date to be scheduled. So now you're looking at it a month to 2 months of us knowing that this activity is going on, but legally we can't do anything to fix it immediately because one of our residents' vehicle has been involved in a lot of shootings over the past like 6 or 7 months, and the vehicle is parked on the property, but there's nothing we can do. They tow it, and they just get it out towed.
So what you're saying is other than the security, we have to change the policy of how soon we can eradicate and get rid of that troubled person, opposed to 14 days and all the red tape.
Exactly, because
so it has to be an immediate expungement.
Or I know that's something that will have to be looked at because I'm like as far as the ACOP goes, but because the same individuals who were involved in the shooting, we've seen them in the unit. We have Officer Wright showed me and Miss Cindy, who's the site manager at one, video of them, illegal drugs, guns, and they're clearly in the apartment. And we can see because we know what our units look like. But like I said, our hands are tied from a legal side. So then now they're threatening their neighbors as well, and we've had a lot of complaints. Like I said, there's not much we could do as far as fixing the issue, and I just think that leaves the door open for a continued violence. So.
Well, I thank you for that, and we will move forward in tackling that. Thank you.
And with respect with what Mr. Washington said, I don't find it at fault at the property manager, because especially if an individual is being threatened or intimidated, you know, they're in fear for their safety or their children or another family members, I would find it to be very uncommon for them to be forthcoming to, hey, I've got you know, an individual in my apartment that's not a law-abiding citizen, so to speak, you know, but then they find out and then they're like, okay, well, I've already been, so I definitely, I don't want to,
I'm not blaming the site manager.
No, I'm not saying blame.
I just want them to be aware of who's living and who's rotating in and out of those
Of course,
apartments.
and you see a lot of activity does it Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. There's not a lot of that, you know, and they know at 5 o'clock, they see is leaving, cause I drive by these properties on the weekends, at night, you know, what have you, and it's just, there's just people everywhere, and then when you come back at 8 o'clock the next morning, it's,
What
what
I thought about when he said that they can be intimidating and drive someone out of their unit, but now I'm thinking about by the time you have to pay for that unit, they either gonna be smart enough to pay it, because y'all don't watch who pays for that unit as long as they bring that money in. I mean, I'm just, you know what I'm saying? Cause if they intimidated and move somebody out of a unit and now they're using that unit for a trap house or whatever, or now living there, you know, what's the rotation?
Might be in a conversation for another day, but yeah, with all due respect.
Mr. Kruger, if you got any additional information you want to share with us about this matter?
I have one, now, obviously, I mean, the police presence is important, but not to be confused as an intimidation factor, but also to build a relationship, a trusting relationship with the residents and the children, to be also the focus.
There's a lot of programs, community policing, the junior police academy, all the things like that are positive for the communities to see. And there's believe it or not, a large presence of interest in things such as that, and that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and
on how to implement those programs.
The positive, one of the positives that we get to write grants and get a whole lot of people money into these programs in here, so we can actually fund these programs, afford the officers and security team, even bring create recreational opportunities for our students, even through security, recreation, football, and things of that nature. All that can be fun. So there are a lot of great things we can do, but we got to get there first. I got to create this division, and so I think Mr. Cooper taking this on his own time to do this research for him. It didn't cost us a penny. It just cost some time. However, I am going to propose that we have Mr. Cooper as our security director because of the entities and things of his relationship and commitment and diversity that he can bring and how he can help us deal. And that's the reason that we have asked him for, which leads me in, anything else? That's the reason why I need this Brooks Brothers there's another reason why I need this Brooks Brothers contract signed. Like
so let's have more of that discussion when we move into executive session.
Yeah, I need that signed today.
Let's have more
yes,
discussion.
Yes, sir.
When we move into executive
okay.
session.
Okay.
So again, the engagement letters, I think we've got 2 contracts to review here, and then we'll have more discussion briefly about the security and having a little bit more information there. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Discussion items. Are there any reports on committees at this point?
The residential that's forming for Brooklyn Homes, Ms. Hayes, she recently had the flu, and so she couldn't make the deadline of the information that she needed to get, so we can get the resident council ready for July. So that's going to be moved to August. I was in talks with her. We're going to meet again Sunday, and so for what she has to do and voting on the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and sergeant of arms, we're gonna do that as soon as possible. She's feeling better. And so, we're gonna record it. I'll be there, not to participate, but just watch the thing and have it recorded, show who's elected and who's not elected. Okay? All right.
Sounds good.
All right.
Any public comments? The commissioners, items, commissioners, have you got anything that you would like to state at this point? Before we move to executive session. That being said, I will entertain a motion to move to executive session.
Make a motion to move to executive session.
Do
I second that motion.
I have a motion by Commissioner Sorrells to move to executive session, seconded by Madam Vice Chair Bailey. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those have the same. That motion passes unanimously. We are now moving to executive session. All right, we're gonna call this meeting back to order from our lunch recess. A couple things here. I believe our Mr. Baker, our interim executive director, has a very brief presentation he'd like to give us.
Yeah, I'm not gonna keep everyone long. This is where we are. Everything, our presentation this morning, the staff is working very hard, to see, to try to move from this point. This is basically a standard rated unit. This is what you're looking at.
Ready for who?
This is a basic standard rating unit. This is where we are getting away from. This is indicative of just generation of neglect and lack of inspection and follow-up. Where we want to go, well, not where we want to go, where we are going is here. That's where we're going. So the meetings today and putting in the systems that we'll have a special call meeting for organization charting things, and this is where we're going. And the immediate staff understands where we are. So you got Ms. Cooper?
Okay.
Campus housing?
Yes, sir.
I understand y'all got students there, which was senior living, multiple living. So that's what we're doing.
Solar panels?
What type of material on the outside? Will it be brick, will it be stucco? What kind of material?
Personally, I hate stucco, but it just depends on
I
the architect.
do too.
It depends on, so, some people love stucco. I got friends I know they bought $1.2 million house for a stucco house. I laughed at them. So, you know, it's wasting money to me because
You gotta wash them.
by the time you add maintenance on the life cycle of stucco, you could break your house up and save money. So listen, that's just a brief. It's just a brief presentation. You see these slides. You see these numbers again. But just want to let you know, we're just not here just spending and requesting money. And we're going somewhere. Okay?
Well,
Thank you so much.
I like the visual aids of where we potentially can go in the future.
Oh, we're going there.
We need to hang that up so everybody can see where we're going. Hang it up in the foyer or in the hallway or somewhere.
Yeah, not quite yet.
You know, you gotta give him his money first before I hang up.
Not with the old and with the new.
No, not quite yet, but we will put this in because we don't want to give people the misconception. You getting this when you getting that. So we got to have, once we kick in the RAD and we got a process to execute, but we'll get there. We'll get there. All right?
All right.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we did discuss a few things in executive session. So, as far as our contracts are concerned, I believe our discussion was based on, we did have discussion about the contracts, but I will entertain a motion on those contracts.
I would like to make a motion that we defer to our subcommittee, which is the financial committee, to meet with the attorney tomorrow and expedite this process quickly, as far as the contract signing of Brooks, should I say this right? The Brooks Law Firm, and also Kevin Kim.
KBK.
KBK, I'm sorry, KBK. I want to say his name.
Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Dickerson to defer the contracts to the Finance Subcommittee with the lawyers to expedite those contracts. Seconded by Madam Vice Chair Bailey. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. That motion passes unanimously. With the establishment of the security division, I think there's a little bit more information that we're going to require as a board. We'd like to have a proper presentation, proper more information.
Yes.
Of how this thing's going to be structured, what's going to go into it, such and so forth. So I'm going to ask that Mr. Cooper and Mr. Baker, you guys get together and see if we can, just kind of give us a little bit more of how it needs to be structured, how we're going to do this moving forward. I understand the level of potential criminal activity we may have on our properties, and I understand that we will require solutions for those. I just want more information. I believe the board would be have the same mindset of having that information available to us so that we can proceed forward on and make informed decisions on this security division.
Right. And I do plan on asking Mr. Cooper to run that for us with his level of experience. So I won't put full disclosure. And so
Can you, and I understand that's potential coming on as personnel, and I understand that even that would fall to the executive director as far as that hiring process would go. But can we have a little more background information on Mr. Cooper?
yeah, you sure will.
I mean, I really don't know the guy.
I know, yes, you will.
But the board may want to also have a little bit more knowledge on, so if you guys can send over some additional information, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll make sure that we put together a nice executive package for presentation for everyone, and then that we outline some strategic initiative where we're going with this, and our purpose for doing it, and so we need to move forward in that vein.
Okay, there are no other things on our agenda for today.
I motion that we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? I have a motion by Madam Vice Chair Bailey to adjourn, seconded by Commissioner Dickerson to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all very much for this.